Chapter 593. Di Beichun wrapped his hands around Bailey Hongzhuang's slender waist, his lips close to Bailey Hongzhuang's ear, and said, "Wife, today the students in the college are going home to visit their families. This horse is already not enough. If you buy another one, what will others do?" His warm breath blew into Bailey Hongzhuang's ear, and a feeling of numbness came from her body. Such an ambiguous contact made Bailey Hongzhuang's cheeks turn red in an instant. Di Beichun looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's red earlobes, and the smile in his eyes gradually deepened. Although his wife was usually fearless, she was very shy when it came to this kind of thing. "Di Beichun, let's go." Unable to stand this ambiguous atmosphere, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but speak out. This guy was simply a shameless bad guy. He had already grasped her weakness. It was really hateful. "If my wife says let's go, your husband naturally has no objection." Di Beichun's hands gradually closed, and he hugged Bailey Hongzhuang closer. With a wave of his hand, he directly drove the horse forward. Ta-ta-ta. The sound of horse hooves sounded, and Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun also gradually approached Fombo country. However, these two people were in a state of sightseeing, so they were not in a hurry. Along the way, Di Beichun and Bailey Hongzhuang both appreciated the surrounding scenery. The two people usually spent their time on cultivation and rarely had this kind of free time. Therefore, the two people enjoyed this very much. "Di Beichun, is it okay if you don't go back to Tiangang sect?" Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but ask. Di Beichun had been at Kanglan College for some time. Even if Di Beichun had already stabilized his position when he returned to Tiangang sect, she was afraid that there would be some changes if he didn't stay in the sect for such a long time. Di Beichun's eyes changed slightly. "My wife doesn't like me accompanying you." Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head. "I'm just worried that you've been out for too long, and it will affect you." Even if Di Beichun was the master of Tiangang sect, and Di Beichun was the young master of Tiangang sect, now that the master had left the sect for such a long time, Di Beichun, as the young master, had not stayed in the sect. The matters of the sect were handed over to the elders to handle. In the long run, this wasn't a good thing. Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichun felt relieved. "Hey Mu and the others have always been reporting to me about the sect's matters. Even though I'm not in the sect, I still understand the sect's matters. Unless there are some very important matters that I have to go back to, otherwise there is no need for my wife to worry." "So that's how it is." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded her head. Fortunately, Di Beichun had people like Hey Mu by his side who wholeheartedly worked for him. This saved her a lot of trouble. "Why haven't I seen Hey Mu recently?" Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows in doubt. When she first met Di Beichun, Hey Mu had always been by Di Beichun's side. Thinking about it, Hey Mu should be Di Beichun's close shadow guard. She didn't know why, but ever since Di Beichun came to Kanglan College, she had only seen Hey Mu once. Di Beichun's expression changed a bit, faintly revealing some unnaturalness. "I've recently sent Hey Mu to do some other things." Chapter 594. "Wifey," Di Beichun softly called out. "N." Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. "What's wrong?" "Wifey, you see, I've already called you wifey for so long, but you haven't even called me husband once. Why don't you call me husband once?" Di Beichun's eyes flashed with anticipation. Thinking back to the time when Bailey Hongzhuang's heart wasn't with him, this was naturally impossible. Now that he and Bailey Hongzhuang's hearts were connected, he had been looking forward to this call for a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly startled. Di Beichun's sudden words were really beyond her expectations. When she thought of the word husband, she really couldn't say it out loud. "No," Bailey Hongzhuang said. "Wifey, how about you just call me that once?" Di Beichun's face rippled with a playful smile. "Just once?" "No. Wifey, your husband is very sad. There's no one else around here. You don't have to be shy." Di Beichun blinked and deliberately put on a look. His eyes were full of expectation as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Beichun's cute appearance and felt helpless. In fact, when Di Beichun said something with such a handsome face, it was really hard to refuse. However, Bailey Hongzhuang also couldn't say these two words. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't agree, Di Beichun raised his eyebrows. His wifey's reaction was also not unexpected. After all, he had a deep understanding of how shy his wifey was. Thinking of this, Bei-chan continued, "Wifey, you always call me Bei-chan, isn't it too distant? In my opinion, how about we remove the surname in front?" Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment. Speaking of which, it was indeed inappropriate for her to keep calling Bei-chan like this. I know. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang agreed, Bei-chan was happy. "Wifey, you agree?" Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Looking at Bei-chan's excited look, she felt very funny in her heart. The dignified Tiangang sect young lord was actually so happy over such a small matter. If this were to spread out, who knows how many people would laugh. "Wifey, since that's the case, why don't you call me first?" Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Bei-chan. "Next time, call Bei-chan." Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's light and gentle voice, Bei-chan's eyes lit up, and a thick joy instantly appeared on his handsome face. "Wifey, can you call me again?" Bailey Hongzhuang stepped forward. She no longer intended to pay attention to this guy, who was insatiable. Bei-chan chased after Bailey Hongzhuang with a smile on his face. His wifey was especially interesting when teased. In the past, he always didn't understand why those lovers could be so happy over such a small matter when they were together. Until now, he finally understood. Looking at the thin and graceful white figure in front of him, Bei-chan's eyes were filled with a touch of gentleness. Now, he had no other wish, and only hoped to be able to grow old with Bailey Hongzhuang like this. As the two of them traveled on a scenic tour, the journey that should have taken them 7 days took them more than 10 days to complete. However, the two didn't feel that the journey was long at all. Instead, they felt that time passed very quickly. This was probably the most relaxing period of time the two had spent together so far. Chapter 595. Fengbo Country, Imperial City. The 10-mile-long street was crowded with people. There was an endless stream of pedestrians, and the sound of pedaling could be heard. As soon as the two of them walked through the city gates, the earth-shattering clamor and bustle entered their ears. Every part of the Imperial City was showing the prosperity of the Fengbo Country. Looking at the familiar scene in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang was filled with emotions. She did not have many good memories of this place. It was also a sad place in the heart of the former Bailey Hongzhuang. The only memory that made her happy was that she met Bei-chan here. Bei-chan noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's slightly complicated expression. Knowing his wife's past, he also understood the complicated meaning of this place to Bailey Hongzhuang. "Wife, I will always be by your side in the future." Bei-chan's voice was slightly deep, with seriousness and determination. Bailey Hongzhuang did not have a happy life in the past, but in the future, he would make Bailey Hongzhuang happy. Hearing the comforting meaning in Bei-chan's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a bright and charming smile, like the bright moon, light and gentle. "I know." The faint and gentle voice contained her trust in Bei-chan, and the light of confidence flowed on her beautiful face. She didn't take the past too seriously. Although she was very clear about those memories, she didn't experience them herself. Moreover, Bailey Yuyin and the others had completely disappeared in front of her and would never appear again in the future. She just felt that Fengbo Country did not seem to have much connection with her. Originally, there was an inseparable relationship between the general's mansion and her, but after knowing her true identity, this connection had completely disappeared. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Bei-chan held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand tightly and said with a smile, "Let's go back to Prince Chen's mansion to have a look. We haven't been back for a long time." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. "All right, I want to go back and take a look too." The two of them quickened their pace and rushed to Prince Chen's mansion, which was their little home. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Bei-chan walked together on the streets of the Imperial City, many surprised and shocked gazes fell on them. Many people stuck their heads out and craned their necks to size up the pair that had suddenly appeared. In his line of sight, a man and a woman stood side by side. The man was dressed in a light golden brocade robe. Black bamboo embroidered with silver threads was reflected on the brocade robe. Under the sunlight, it reflected bits of silver light. His figure was tall and straight, and his appearance was handsome and elegant. His perfect and impeccable face was rippling with a trace of an evil and charming smile. His eyes were sharp and wise, as if he could see through people's hearts with one look, especially that evil and charming smile, which made the women around him blush and their hearts beat faster after seeing it. The woman wore a white gauze dress. Her body was like a willow, thin and graceful and graceful. Her face, in particular, could be said to be exceedingly beautiful. Different from the gentleness of ordinary women, the woman's eyebrows revealed a bit of heroic spirit, which added a trace of spirituality to her perfect and moving face, making her unforgettable. The two of them walked side by side, like a golden boy and a jade girl, a match made in heaven. Like a beautiful scenery, they attracted everyone's attention. Everyone was puzzled. Where did this wonderful woman come from? She was so outstanding. Chapter 596. Hey, isn't this Prince Chun and Princess Chun? A merchant looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen carefully, and his face showed astonishment. He had seen Prince Chun and Princess Chun before, because their appearance was really unforgettable. However, he was not sure now, because Prince Chun was a cripple. The man in front of him was clearly walking well. How could he be Prince Chun? As the merchant's voice fell, everyone's eyes narrowed. Now they only felt that these two people were very familiar, but they did not think that they were Prince Chun and Princess Chun, because, although they could look similar, it was impossible for a cripple to stand up. Yes, this is Prince Chun and Princess Chun. I haven't seen you for a while. Princess Chun seems to be more beautiful, and Prince Chun is more handsome. But how can Prince Chun suddenly stand up? The lady boss looked at the two figures walking in front of her in astonishment. This was too incredible. Just as the lady boss said, Bailey Hongzhuang was in the growth stage. After this period of growth, coupled with the influence of learning zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, her temperament became more and more outstanding. Just looking at her, she gave people an indescribable sense of nobility and dignity. Oh my God, Prince Chun and Princess Consort Chun are such a perfect match. Who dares to say that they are a joke? I think those people from before are blind. The people in the imperial city were completely stunned. In the past, Prince Chun made them sigh with emotion. If it were not for Prince Chun being unable to stand up, then Prince Chun would definitely be the most handsome man in the imperial city. This point had once made many women sigh with regret. But now, Prince Chun actually stood up. This temperament, this charm, even the crown prince Xianyuan Huan could not be compared with him. Some of the people who came to the imperial city from other places had curious expressions on their faces when they heard the discussions. Why are you looking at them so strangely? You don't know this. After hearing this, the boss also started to talk. Back then, Prince Chun was still a cripple who could not stand up, and Princess Chun was also known to be a good-for-nothing. Listening to the boss's narration, some of the people who didn't know what was going on had a look of amazement on their faces. Who would have thought that these two people, who were originally mocked by everyone, would become such outstanding people after being together? No one would be able to associate them with the blind and crippled people from before. Oh my God, Prince Chun is so handsome. I really admire him. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen walked all the way. Many girls on both sides of the street were attracted to Di Beichen after seeing Di Beichen. In the past, they thought that Di Beichen was a cripple who could not stand up. Although they yearned for him, they did not dare to be with him. Now that Di Beichen had stood up, he was undoubtedly the ideal candidate in their hearts. If he didn't seize the opportunity now, when would he? Beichen, it seems that you are quite charming. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly, with a teasing smile on her lips. Di Beichen's smile widened a little. He tilted his head and approached Bailey Hongzhuang. I only want my wife to see my charm. Chapter 597. Di Beichen's gaze swept over the people around him. The next moment, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he directly held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand, closing the distance between the two. It was as if he was making an oath, telling everyone around the intimate relationship between the two. Even though Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang were married, Such a bold action still shocked many people present. In this era of strict customs, such an action was really against the norm. However, some young lovers showed envy on their faces after seeing Baechan's action. I've heard that Prince Chun and Princess Chun have a very good relationship. Now that I see it with my own eyes, I understand how good their relationship is. Yes, it's really enviable. I don't know if I can find such a devoted person in my life. Bailey Hongzhuang was also shocked by Baechan's sudden action. At first, she wanted to let go of Baechan's hand, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt that it was not necessary. She understood Baechan's feelings for her, and she also understood her own heart. Since they had already decided to be together, there was no need to be afraid of the eyes of others, because they were a couple. She, Bailey Hongzhuang, had always been magnanimous. Since they were together, there was no need to hide anything. Let everyone clearly know that they were together. Feeling Bailey Hongzhuang holding his hand back, Baechan's smile widened a little, and his ink-like eyes were shining with unprecedented light. Baechan sped up and swaggered back to Prince Chen's mansion with Bailey Hongzhuang. At the same time, the news that Prince Chen stood up quickly spread throughout the imperial city. 1 spread to 10, and 10 to 100. Almost in a short time, everyone in the imperial city had known the news. Back to Prince Chen's mansion, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but wonder, Baechan, why did you suddenly walk so fast? Baechan narrowed his handsome eyes, and there was a bit of dissatisfaction in his expression. You don't know that those guys have been looking at you with lustful eyes. I can't stand it. Along the way, he only felt that all the men's eyes were focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. The covetous and fantasizing eyes made him very unhappy. As Baechan's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help chuckling. Nonsense, it's not like that. Baechan stepped forward and directly approached Bailey Hongzhuang's body. In my opinion, it is like this. Bailey Hongzhuang took a step back and pressed her body against the wall. You are too domineering. Baechan stretched out his right hand and put it behind Bailey Hongzhuang's head, closing the distance between them, and said, I am so domineering. You are mine, only mine. There was a hint of jealousy in his low and charming voice. His wife was so beautiful that many men had improper thoughts about her. He couldn't let any man have a chance to take advantage of her. His wife was only his. Listening to Baechan's domineering oath, Bailey Hongzhuang felt helpless and funny, but at the same time, there was some joy in her heart. She had always known that Baechan was proud, but she didn't know that Baechan was also so domineering. Chapter 598. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's coquettish expression, Baechan's heart trembled. His gaze involuntarily focused on Bailey Hongzhuang's full and moist red lips. Every time he was so close to his wife, he would have the urge to kiss her. He didn't know how sweet her red lips would be. Noticing the surging emotions in Baechan's starry eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly realized that the situation in front of her seemed to be too ambiguous. Bailey Hongzhuang's head shrank slightly. She immediately planned to pass Baechan's hand and escape from this dangerous area. However, Baechan had long discovered her plan. His body directly pressed against Bailey Hongzhuang's body, not allowing Bailey Hongzhuang to escape. In the next moment, his handsome face approached Bailey Hongzhuang, directly attacking the place he had been yearning for a long time. Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a thick shadow attacking her lips. It was fierce, but it contained a bit of tenderness and love. Without waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang to escape, her lips were captured by Baechan. The soft and hot touch was just like Baechan's tenderness and passion. He couldn't wait to express his passionate and strong love for Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes widened. Her mind was blank, and she didn't know what to do. She could only stare blankly at the magnified, handsome, and perfect face in front of her. He kissed her passionately. His kiss was gentle. She tossed and turned, filled with warmth. His kiss was also passionate. The scorching temperature was close to her, making her feel his strong and passionate love. Baechan pulled Bailey Hongzhuang into his arms. This fragrance was sweeter than he had imagined. It had a fatal attraction, making him reluctant to let go. Bailey Hongzhuang's cheeks were already flushed red, and the air in her mouth was gradually disappearing. Di Beichen only released Bailey Hongzhuang when he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was out of breath. Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Di Beichen's heart was moved, and he felt pity. He quietly moved closer to Bailey Hongzhuang's ear and said with a smile, "Wife, remember to close your eyes next time." Bailey Hongzhuang's cheeks were as red as apples. Her earlobes were also so red that it seemed like blood was about to drip. "Di Beichen." Bailey Hongzhuang stomped her feet. This damned guy dared to laugh at her after taking advantage of her. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's embarrassed and angry appearance, Di Beichen's smile deepened. "Wife is really cute. Your husband's heart is moved. Get out of here." Bailey Hongzhuang was angry. This guy was really shameless. His words were getting more and more outrageous. However, just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to drive Di Beichen out, Di Beichen suddenly hugged Bailey Hongzhuang in his arms. Bailey Hongzhuang was surrounded by a broad and warm embrace. A faint and intoxicating fragrance entered her nose. It was the smell that belonged exclusively to Di Beichen. "What are you doing? Get out," Bailey Hongzhuang said with shame and anger. She was really helpless against this guy's trick. Di Beichen's hands gradually closed, and he hugged Bailey Hongzhuang tightly. It was as if he wanted to integrate Bailey Hongzhuang into his bones. "Wife, thank you for agreeing to be with me," Di Beichen slowly said. He had never felt so happy until Bailey Hongzhuang was with him. Chapter 599. In this life, I will not let you down. Di Beichen's voice was sincere and firm. As long as he was alive, his heart would only belong to his wife. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a gentle and happy smile, and her hands slowly wrapped around Di Beichen's waist. Hand in hand, we will grow old together. From the beginning, she had never thought that they would be separated. What she wanted was only Di Beichen's heart. As for other things, she never cared about them. With Bailey Hongzhuang's voice falling, Di Beichen's arms tightened a little, and his smile became more dazzling. He murmured, "Hand in hand, we will grow old together." The news that Prince Chun had stood up spread like a gust of wind throughout the imperial city. Everyone knew about it, and it had become a hot topic of discussion among the people. In the Prime Minister's mansion, Li Yue was still immersed in the joy of Crown Prince Xianyuan Huan's return, but she was also worried that Xianyuan Huan would be unhappy after seeing her appearance. She was both happy and worried, and her mood was extremely complicated. Crown Princess, such a noble status, was simply her biggest dream. Now, after kicking away the two stumbling blocks, Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Yuyan, she finally became Xianyuan Huan's fiancée. However, facing her current face, she was really sad. At this moment, the maid told her a piece of news. Miss Bailey Hongzhuang also came back from Kanglin College. Hearing this, Li Yue's eyes were filled with disgust and resentment. It's normal for that woman to come back, but her disabled prince has not come back since he left. Don't tell me he doesn't want her anymore? Li Yue chuckled, and her voice was full of sarcasm and ridicule. Although she couldn't find any evidence, she always felt that the sudden appearance of so many freckles on her face must have something to do with Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, she hated Bailey Hongzhuang to the bone. She only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang's days would be extremely miserable. Only then would she be able to feel a little happier. Di Beichen had left Fengbo for a long time. Although Bailey Hongzhuang had married a cripple, which was enough to make her happy, but this cripple had abandoned Bailey Hongzhuang and left, which made her feel even more gratified. The maidservant looked at Li Yue's expression, her face showing a little embarrassment. Miss Bailey Hongzhuang came back with Prince Chun. Li Yue was slightly stunned, and then her eyebrows twisted. A trace of doubt flashed through her dark eyes. When did Prince Chun go to Kanglin College? He is a cripple if he goes to the Azure Water School. Isn't he just asking for humiliation? Miss, I heard that Prince Chin's legs have recovered and he can stand up, the maid whispered. As soon as these words came out, Li Yue's expression suddenly changed, as if she had seen a ghost. Her eyes were fixed on the maid, and she couldn't believe what she had just heard. What did you say? Say it again. Hearing Li Yue's stern questioning, the maid trembled, and a trace of fear appeared on her small face. She said timidly, "Today Prince Chun and Princess Chun came back, and they walked on the street hand in hand, which was seen by many people. Now the news has spread all over the imperial city." Bang! Li Yue's face was livid, and her hands directly overturned the teacup on the table. How is it possible? Prince Chun has been disabled for such a long time. How can he stand up? What kind of a mortal was Prince Chun? Chapter 600. At the thought of this, a strong jealousy swept through Li Yue's heart. Everyone knew that Prince Chun was first class in both appearance and temperament. If it weren't for his crippled feet, he would have become the most admired object of all the women in the imperial city. Even if Prince Chun was crippled, there were still many women who admired him. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang's marriage to the crippled prince was her way of mocking Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that Prince Chun had stood up, what kind of scene would it be? That bitch, how could she be worthy? Li Yue was furious. She hated that bitch and only hoped that she would have a miserable life. If it weren't for Bailey Hongzhuang, she would be the most glorious crown princess now. How could she be ashamed to see others because of the freckles on her face? If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang, she wouldn't have missed the royal family's hunting competition. She would have definitely become a part of Azure Water School, flying together with His Highness the Crown Prince, becoming the object of everyone's envy. But now, she could only stay in her own room and worry about her own face. That woman who had once been trampled under her feet and was worthless was now so glorious? "Miss, don't be angry. Don't hurt your body." The servant girl hurriedly cared. Li Yue's face was gloomy and her eyes were full of hatred. "Damn it! How can I let Bailey Hongzhuang be so glorious? Have you informed General Dai?" The servant girl's face showed a touch of doubt. General Dai rarely appears in front of the world recently because of the death of his son and daughter. "Miss, what do you mean?" Li Yue's lips curved into a dangerous and ferocious arc. "General Dai's son and daughter are dead. Now, the person who killed his children has returned to the imperial city. What do you think General Dai will do?" Bailey Hongzhuang was so arrogant that she had offended many people. She believed that once General Dai knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was back, he would never let Bailey Hongzhuang have an easy time. Since Bailey Hongzhuang was back, she naturally had to find some ways to make Bailey Hongzhuang unhappy. "Go and inform General Dai of this news." Hearing this, a hint of hesitation appeared on the servant girl's face, and there was a hint of embarrassment. "Why aren't you going?" Li Yue raised her tone. "I think you don't want to do this job properly, do you?" The servant girl shuddered and hurriedly said, "Miss, I'll go right away." Li Yue looked satisfied as she watched the servant girl leave quickly. Damned Bailey Hongzhuang. I won't let her have a good time. In the palace, after Emperor Xianyuan Yutian knew that Di Beichen had returned, a rare look of panic appeared on his face. If he had known that Di Beichen would stand up one day, he would not have turned a blind eye to the humiliation that Di Beichen had suffered in the past 3 years. He had always known that Di Beichen's identity was not simple. A person who came from a cultivation sect would naturally not be simple. It was precisely because of this that he gave Di Beichen the status of a prince and treated him with good food and drink. However, a year had passed, and Di Beichen had not made any progress. In addition, the civil and military officials, as well as the common people, mistook him for his illegitimate son. It was a loss of face for him. Therefore, he was less polite to Di Beichen. Chapter 601. Xianyuan Yutian was now almost certain that the matter of Di Beichen suddenly standing up was definitely related to Bailey Hongzhuang. It was very likely that Bailey Hongzhuang was the one who cured him. Thinking of Bailey Hongzhuang's current achievements, Xianyuan Yutian was extremely regretful. If he had known that Bailey Hongzhuang would have such achievements, no matter what, he would not have allowed Xianyuan Huan to cause trouble and cancel the engagement. He had never understood this point. Since Bailey Hongzhuang was such a powerful person, why was she so unbearable in the past? Liar. This was definitely the best liar Xianyuan Yutian had ever seen in his life. Most importantly, even Bailey Hongzhuang was kept in the dark. What was this Bailey Hongzhuang trying to do? Xinyuan Yutian was also caught in a blind spot. At this point, there was no use in regretting. The only thing he could hope for was to minimize the impact. Di Beiqian and Bailey Hongzhuang's return this time was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity. He had to find a way to let Di Beiqian's anger dissipate. Otherwise, he would really be unable to sit or stand still. Xinyuan Huan really did not understand why his imperial father and imperial mother were so nervous after knowing that Di Beiqian had returned. Even if Di Beiqian stood up, he was still just a prince of Fengbo country. How could he be disrespectful to them? Imperial mother, just tell me the identity of Di Beiqian. Why are you and imperial father so worried? Xinyuan Huan looked at Jiang Jinying in front of him. He really could not understand. In this huge Fengbo country, there were the existence above tens of thousands of people. It was just a Di Beiqian. They did not need to be so worried. He had never seen his imperial father and imperial mother reveal such worry since he was a child. Seeing the puzzled look on Xinyuan Huan's face, Jiang Jinying sighed, her face full of worry. Huan Di Beiqian's identity is not as simple as you think. In my opinion, you'd better find a way to establish a good relationship with Di Beiqian. If he holds a grudge against you because of what you did in the past, even your father and I can't protect you. As soon as these words came out, Xinyuan Huan's face suddenly changed. He never thought that things would be so serious. Could it be that Di Beiqian had more power than father? This was not impossible, but it was impossible for that kind of existence to appear in Fengbo country, and even more impossible for him to become a crippled prince of Fengbo country. When he thought of how he had humiliated Di Beiqian before, Xinyuan Huan's heart turned cold. Mother Empress, tell me what's going on. Xinyuan Huan's eyes showed a bit of anxiety. Previously, he listened to everyone's guess and only thought that Di Beiqian was really father's illegitimate son. For such a shameful existence, he naturally would not be polite to humiliate Di Beiqian. He even felt that even if he killed Di Beiqian, it would not matter. Di Beiqian, he came from a cultivation sect. At this point, Jiang Jinying no longer hid the news from Xinyuan Huan. In fact, this news could no longer be concealed. After Xinyuan Huan understood everything, his face turned pale in an instant. Mother, since Di Beiqian has such an identity, why didn't you remind me when I humiliated and tortured him? Xinyuan Huan panicked. At this moment, he finally understood why Di Beiqian had always been aloof and indifferent in front of him. Chapter 602. All these years, his pride and arrogance, in the eyes of Di Beiqian, were simply a joke. If it were him, he would definitely not have Di Beiqian's bearing and calmness. All this time, he had only regarded Di Beiqian as his father's illegitimate son, so Di Beiqian's swallowing humiliation was completely understandable. But Di Beiqian's true identity was actually so high, so for him to fall from such a high pedestal to his current position, if it were an ordinary person, they would not be able to accept it, let alone endure his own humiliation. Thinking of this, Xinyuan Huan suddenly felt that Di Beiqian was very frightening. This kind of temperament was indeed worthy of being a cultivator from a large force. The situation at that time was very complicated. Your father and I were also helpless. Jiang Jinying sighed, her face showing a bit of helplessness. Although Di Beiqian's identity is noble, he was driven here because of his crippled legs. There were people above who said that they did not want Di Beiqian to have a good life here, so your father and I did not stop you. However, Di Beiqian's identity is not simple after all. Once the sovereign returns, or if there are other variables, the people above will certainly not admit it, then your father and I will become scapegoats. It is precisely because of this that your father and I have been carefully weighing the pros and cons of Di Beiqian's life in these 3 years. We did not dare to let Di Beiqian's life be too comfortable, but we also did not dare to let Di Beiqian suffer too much damage. Jiang Jinying's graceful face showed a sigh. For this matter, she and Xinyuan Yutian could be said to have thought about it for a long time. Originally, they only thought that perhaps after the sovereign returned, Di Beiqian's identity would return to the past, but they did not expect that Di Beichun would actually stand up. This was like a miracle. Di Beichun actually stood up after being crippled for 3 years. Not only that, according to the information they received, Di Beichun had already returned to Tiangong sect to deal with those who had plotted against him previously. Today's Di Beichun was no longer the same as before. He was no longer in dire straits. Instead, he was the noble young sect master. Even if she and the emperor saw Di Beichun, they still had to be courteous and didn't dare to be disrespectful. Hearing this, Xianyuan Huan understood. Just as his mother had said, this was probably the best way to balance the two of them. I see. Xianyuan Huan sighed. Before, he was quite dissatisfied with Di Beichun and had the idea of teaching Di Beichun a lesson. But now all of that was gone. He only hoped that Di Beichun could forgive him for what he had done. Otherwise, if Di Beichun wanted his life, there was nothing he could do. Suddenly, Xianyuan Huan frowned. In that case, why did Di Beichun marry Bailey Hongzhuang? It's too strange. If Di Beichun was just an ordinary prince, it wouldn't be strange for him to marry Bailey Hongzhuang. But Di Beichun's identity was so noble. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang was the eldest daughter of the general's mansion, she was definitely not worthy of him. Just like when Di Beichun refused a marriage arranged by his father, Di Beichun should have refused directly. But why did he agree? Jiang Jining shook her head. I don't know. In my opinion, it's very likely that Di Beichun likes Bailey Hongzhuang, so he married her. Apart from this reason, she couldn't think of any other reason. Chapter 603. It was precisely because of this that they became less and less concerned about Di Beichun's situation. In the beginning, they thought that the sovereign would return soon and had been serving Di Beichun with good food and drink. Later, they felt that this hope was getting slimmer and slimmer, so the two of them stopped paying attention to it. Even though Di Beichun's status in their hearts had dropped a bit, if Di Beichun really refused to marry, then she and Xianyuan Yutian would not dare to force him to agree. Therefore, when Di Beichun agreed to the marriage, even she and Xianyuan Yutian were surprised. Now that they thought about it, Di Beichun did not agree to the marriage because of the pressure from the two of them. It was just that he wanted to do it himself, so he pushed the boat with the current. A touch of sadness appeared in Xianyuan Huan's eyes. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang was his fiancée, but it was because of his blindness that Bailey Hongzhuang became the Chunwang Fei. On the contrary, Di Beichun had a unique vision and was able to successfully marry Bailey Hongzhuang. This could be said to be the greatest regret of his life. Mother, now that Di Beichun has returned, I don't know if he will make trouble for us. A touch of worry appeared on Xianyuan Huan's handsome face. If Di Beichun made trouble, it would be difficult for them to face it. Jiang Jining's face was also very ugly. I don't know. Now the decision is no longer in our hands. It all depends on Di Beichun's plan. Looking at Jiang Jining's helpless expression, Xianyuan Huan's heart sank. He had always felt that his identity was noble enough. Even when he went to the Kanglan school, his identity as the crown prince still received many compliments. Although he was not a student of the special enrollment class, his limelight was not weak. On weekdays, there were many people in the school who flattered him. He always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would regret marrying Di Beichun, but he didn't expect that he was the real frog at the bottom of the well. The identity that he was so proud of could not be compared to Di Beichun at all. He was afraid that Di Beichun had always regarded him as a joke. I'm going to hold a banquet and invite Di Beichun and Bailey Hongzhuang to attend. Hopefully, we can find a way to resolve this issue. Jiang Jining's eyes flashed with wisdom. Now that things had come to this, all the power was in the hands of Di Beichun. The only thing they could do was to clear their names. They believed that Di Beichun also knew that they were doing this because someone had ordered them to do so. They could only try their best to push the blame to that person. Di Beichun should be able to understand. At the very least, the price they had to pay would not be too high. Xianyuan Huan nodded slightly. I'll apologize to Di Beichun. At this point, Xianyuan Huan naturally would not be stupid enough to put on the airs of Crown Prince. Although he had always been very unhappy with Di Beichun, he also knew that Di Beichun was not a narrow-minded person. If he took the initiative to apologize and his attitude was sincere enough, he believed that Di Beichen would not care too much about it. In fact, this was the only way. If Di Beichen did not accept, then he could only pay the price for what he had done before. Huan I'm relieved that you can think like this. Jiang Jining breathed a sigh of relief. She was most worried that Xianyuan Huan would not bow his head. Then their situation would be even more difficult. Mother, you can rest assured I understand. Chapter 604. Huan, or what are you going to do with Li Yuyu? After Jiang Jining came up with a way to deal with Di Beichun, she remembered Xianyuan Huan's marriage. Originally, Xianyuan Huan was the crown prince, and it was not difficult to choose an excellent crown princess. But for some reason, every time Xianyuan Huan chose a crown princess, there would be various problems. Bailey Hongzhuang naturally did not need to be mentioned. Bailey Yuyin was directly disfigured and died in the royal hunting competition. Finally, the prime minister's daughter Li Yuyue was chosen. However, Li Yuyue's face had a lot of freckles. Although she never saw Li Yuyue later from the attitude of the prime minister's family, the number of freckles was definitely not small. The dignified crown princess would become the mother of the country in the future. If her face was full of freckles, wouldn't it be too shameful? How could she be the mother of the country? But if the crown princess was abolished and a new one was chosen, she was afraid that Xianyuan Huan would become a joke. The dignified crown princess was like a child's play. Before marriage, the crown princess had been changed again and again. Anyone who heard it would not think it was a glorious thing. Thinking of this, Jiang Jining was really sad. If she had known earlier, she would not have let Xianyuan Huan willfully cancel the engagement with Bailey Hongzhuang. Then there would not have been these bad things later. Hearing this, Xianyuan Huan also frowned, and there was some impatience in his eyes. Now he was also too upset about this marriage, and he did not even want to choose a crown princess. Mother, this son is now wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. I'm not keen on this kind of thing. It is better to put it aside for the time being. Xianyuan Huan said aloud. How can that be? Jiang Jining immediately objected. You are the crown prince. It is good for you to have a crown princess early. Only in this way will the civil and military officials feel that you are a real adult. But I am now cultivating at Kanglan College. Most of the time, I am not in the imperial city. Xianyuan Huan argued. Jiang Jining waved her hand. Her attitude was very firm. You are the future emperor of the country. Letting you cultivate at Kanglan College is just to prove your strength. You are not going to become a cultivator in the future, but the emperor of Fengbo country. You can meet some potential cultivators at Kanglan College. You can pay attention to them. If you meet the right ones, you can recruit them. Most of the cultivators at Kanglan College have a good future of the Kanglan College. But cultivation is... But it is to cultivate. And Xianyuan Huan's expression changed a bit. Now that he had stayed in the college for a while, he was indeed affected by the emotions of the cultivators. Now that he heard Jiang Jining's reminder, he realized that he had really gone astray. Mother, I understand. Xianyuan Huan nodded. Jiang Jining looked at Xianyuan Huan with admiration. After so many things, Xianyuan Huan had become much more mature than before, which made her very satisfied. Chapter 605. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen lived in Prince Chen's mansion, living a comfortable and carefree life. Compared with the previous situation of living in Prince Chen's mansion, their mood now was completely different. They took it as a holiday and wandered the streets from time to time, very comfortable. In the imperial city, everyone knew that Prince Chun and Princess Chun had a very good relationship and had become the object of envy of young men and women. They only hoped that in the future, they could be like Prince Chun and Princess Chun, loving each other and living happily together for 100 years. Bailey Hongzhuang went to the all-medicine workshop. Ji Wenbin was very happy to see her, and the two exchanged greetings. Speaking of which, Bailey Hongzhuang's first friend after transmigrating was Ji Wenbin. Ji Wenbin had always treated her as a sister and had given her a lot of help. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang was very grateful to Ji Wenbin. Hongzhuang, how are you doing in Kanglan College? Ji Wenbin's face was filled with excitement and joy. I haven't seen you for so long. and you have become more beautiful. Brother Ji is joking with me again. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled, and there was some joy in her expression. Not bad. I have made many like-minded friends in Kanglan College. That's good. Ji Wenbin nodded. Is Prince Chen good to you? I heard that Prince Chen's legs have been cured. Could it be that you cured him? Bailey Hongzhuang's smile widened a little. Brother Ji is really smart. He is very good to me. Now he is accompanying me to cultivate in Kanglan College. Oh, Ji Wenbin was surprised. He had never heard of this news, but after seeing the faint happiness in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, he also showed a happy smile. That's good. At first, I was worried that you would be wronged if you married Prince Chen. Now it seems that you are far-sighted and have chosen a good husband. Listening to Ji Wenbin's words, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes showed a touch of emotion. Back then, she and Ji Wenbin had only met by chance, but Ji Wenbin had always helped her and was even more worried that she would not marry well. Speaking of which, in this huge imperial city, the first person to treat her sincerely was Ji Wenbin. By the way, your godly Dr. Square is developing very well under the management of Du Tianxua and Dong Sairu. Now, the citizens of the imperial city will go to godly Dr. Square whenever they feel unwell. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. Both of them are very talented in medicine. It's not strange for them to have such achievements. Du Tianxua and Dong Sairu were simple and kind people. She liked them very much, so she left the medical books and experience to them. She believed that their medical skills had improved a lot. Back then, opening the Godly Doctor Square was just a way for her to make a living. She was very satisfied with the current results of the Godly Doctor Square. However, the most important thing for her now was to raise her cultivation level. She couldn't care less about Godly Doctor Square. Leaving it to do Tianxua and Dong Sairu was a good choice. I understand that your ambition is to cultivate. No matter what you do, Brother Ji will support you. Ji Wenbin laughed heartily. In the past, he felt that it was a pity that Bailey Hongzhuang didn't become a doctor despite her excellent medical skills. Now that he had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's talent in many aspects, he didn't mention his previous words. Chapter 606. Dong Sairu and Du Tianxua were very happy to see Bailey Hongzhuang. If Bailey Hongzhuang had not taken them in, they would have nowhere to stay. Chen Wangfei, you're back. Dong Sairu put down the things in her hands and quickly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. She could not hide the joy on her face. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. The academy is on holiday, so I came back to take a look. You've taken good care of Godly Doctor Square. Chen Wangfei, this is the property you left behind. Du Tianxua and I did not dare to neglect it. Dong Sairu smiled happily. She had always been full of respect and admiration towards Bailey Hongzhuang. As a woman, it was great to be able to achieve what Bailey Hongzhuang had done. Du Tianxua also walked over. He had always been shy and introverted, but when he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, he did not know what to say. Only the smile on his face revealed his feelings. Chen Wangfei, Godly Doctor Square's income is not bad. Du Tianxua and I have kept it and waited for your return. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand. I don't have time to take care of Godly Doctor Square now. Since Godly Doctor Square has always been taken care of by the two of you, the income is naturally yours. When she said this, Dong Sairu and Du Tianxua both waved their hands. How can that be? We're only helping you take care of it. Everything is yours. The two of you are very talented in the way of medicine. After all, Godly Doctor Square was built by me. I'm relieved to leave it in your hands. The two of you can take good care of it. I'll leave Godly Doctor Square in your hands. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were gentle. She knew Dong Sairu and Du Tianxua's personalities. However, she had not done anything to Godly Doctor Square in this period of time. She might as well give Godly Doctor Square to them. In this way, it could be considered a good thing. Hearing the meaning in Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Du Tianxua quickly said, Chen Wangfei, we are already very grateful that you are willing to take us in. Not only that, but you're also imparting your medical skills to us. This is a blessing that we've accumulated over 8 lifetimes. However, this Godly Doctor Square is your business. Dong Sairu and I only want to help you manage it. You can't just hand it over to us. He had received enough kindness from Princess Chun. He only wanted to repay Princess Chen's kindness by managing Godly Doctor Square. Dong Sairu, who was standing at the side, nodded her head repeatedly. Chen Wangfei, if you don't have time to take care of Godly Physician Square, we'll help you take care of it. You can't do anything else. Seeing how firm Du Tianxuo and Dong Sairu were, Bailey Hongzhuang hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. She knew how stubborn these two people were. Since that's the case, we'll do as you say. However, the consultation fees that you've earned will belong to you. However, this Godly Doctor Square will still belong to me. What do you think? A gentle and moving smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's exquisite and beautiful face. Although her voice was gentle, it was unusually firm. If you don't agree, then we'll do as I said before. Dong Sairu and Du Tianxuo looked at each other. Since Bailey Hongzhuang had put it this way, the two of them had no other choice. Thank you, Chen Wangfei, the two of them said in unison. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand and chuckled. This was earned by the two of you in the first place. Why are you thanking me? I've already spoken to Big Brother G. How about we go to a restaurant tonight and have a good gathering? All right. Chapter 607. The night was as cool as water, and the wind blew gently. Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the house and poured herself a cup of tea. She was in a very good mood after the gathering with Ji Wenbin and the others. Xiaohe and Xiaobai were also happily rubbing their round bellies. They loved this kind of happy atmosphere the most, and they ate happily. Haha, today's food was so good. A life with good food, that's life. Xiaohe said excitedly. Xiaobai nodded in agreement. It's best to have this kind of gathering a few more times. The dishes in that restaurant today were not bad. Bailey Hongzhuang listened to the conversation between the two little guys and couldn't help but laugh. These two little guys had been trapped in the chaos ring for so many years. They didn't have any other problems, but the only problem was that they couldn't walk when they saw food. White Lion looked at Xiaohe and Xiaobai with disdain. These two guys were simply reincarnated hungry ghosts. Although it was also delicious, its table manners were much better than these two guys. White Lion lay on the table, its two little paws holding a sparkling and translucent demon crystal. This was a great supplement for it. Thinking of this, White Lion directly took a bite, and the sound was crisp. Looking at the row of three gluttons, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, she had many means to earn money. Otherwise, just these three beasts alone would be enough to eat her into poverty. Xiaohe and Xiaobai were easy to raise. The demon crystals that White Lion ate were very expensive. After learning inscription techniques in the stone room of the Chaos Ring for a period of time, she found that the old man in the stone room had only taught her simple inscription techniques. He didn't teach her complex or high-level inscription techniques. However, just like alchemy, although she had mastered it, she couldn't refine it with her previous cultivation. The same was true for inscription techniques. Judging from the old man's demeanor, the inscription technique that he had mastered was absolutely not a simple inscription technique. She also thought of the many stone rooms in the Chaos Ring and felt that there might be even more advanced inscription techniques in the other stone rooms. However, with her current cultivation, she was not qualified to learn it. This ordinary inscription technique was enough for her to study for a period of time. She wasn't in a hurry. Rice had to be eaten one bite at a time. There were many things that couldn't be rushed. Right at this moment, there was a knock on the door. "Wife, you've returned." Xiaohe and Xiaobai immediately shrank their bodies and jumped onto Bailey Hongzhuang's head when they heard her voice. They had eaten so much that they were slightly bigger than before even after they shrank. "Come in." Bailey Hongzhuang responded, and Di Beichun pushed open the door. When he saw Bailey Hongzhuang, a smile appeared on his handsome and perfect face. "Wife, did you have a good time meeting them?" Di Beichun asked. Originally, he had planned to go with his wife, but he thought that he was not familiar with Ji Wenbin and the others. If he went rashly, he was afraid that they wouldn't have a good time. It was better not to go, and they could have a good time. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. "I was very happy. I don't have many friends in the Imperial City, but they are." Di Beichen's deep eyes reflected Bailey Hongzhuang's smile from the bottom of her heart. He knew that his wife had always been a loyal and righteous person. Ji Wenbin and the others also had a certain weight in her heart. Chapter 608. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes narrowed as her lips curled into an enchanting arc. Since it's an invitation from the palace, we naturally have to go and take a look. They had returned this time to watch a good show. Now that Di Beichen's status was completely different, the emperor and empress must be having a headache over this, right? When they go to the palace tomorrow, they would be able to see what the palace's attitude was. Now, the two of them had returned to collect their debts. Those who had humiliated them in the past should think twice about what they should do this time. If they still didn't know what was good for them, they would have to personally teach them a lesson. After all, after being able to hold their heads high, they should properly settle their old debts. As for the general's estate, Bailey Hongzhuang was also prepared to put an end to this matter. In the future, she didn't want to have anything to do with the general's estate, and the title of the general's estate's young miss would no longer belong to her. This was because she had never been the general's young miss and had no relationship with Bailey Jintao. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, Di Beichen revealed a knowing smile. There should be a good show tomorrow. If my wife doesn't like anyone, just teach them a lesson. He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered many grievances in the imperial city over the past few years. Compared to the humiliation he had endured in the past 3 years, Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered far more than him. Now that he could hold his head high, there was no need to hide his hatred. He only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang could vent her anger so that she could be happier in the future. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled slightly, her smile revealing a trace of slyness and ridicule. If that's the case, I'll have to rely on the tiger's might for once. My wife has always been an existence that can't be provoked. Di Beichen chuckled, his eyes filled with a doting light. After confirming this matter, Bailey Hongzhuang's expression turned serious. Beichen, how many of the medicinal ingredients that I wrote for you earlier have you found? This was something that she had always been very concerned about. Although Di Beichen had stood up, the problem of his cursed body had not been completely solved. They had to gather all the necessary materials to transform Di Beichen's cursed body into a body of destiny. In this way, Di Beichen would undergo earth-shaking changes, and his cultivation speed would greatly increase. Tiangang sect has a lot of medicinal herbs. I've searched in the resource warehouse and collected most of them. There are still 4 medicinal herbs that I haven't found yet. Di Beichen said. Since he stabilized his position in Tiangang sect, he began to look for medicinal herbs. Even though Tiangang sect was rich in resources, he still could not gather all of these medicinal herbs. This showed how rare these medicinal herbs were. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang also breathed a sigh of relief. These herbs were not simple, and there were many herbs that were usually priceless. Di Beichen being able to get so many herbs was already much better than she had imagined. What 4 medicinal herbs are still missing? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Violet Dragon Emperor Ginseng, Blazing Cold Tears, Blood Essence Demon Fruit, and 9th rank Purple Ganoderma. Di Beichen's eyes darkened. He had already asked around. These 4 medicinal herbs were extremely rare. They could only be found by chance and rarely appeared. Even though he had sent people out to search, there was still no news. Chapter 609. Bailey Hongzhuang had seen them before, but it also took a long time and a huge amount of manpower and financial resources to gather them. I will also pay more attention to these 4 herbs and try to gather them as soon as possible. Her clear eyes flashed with a bright and determined light. These 4 herbs were related to Di Beichen's future and were extremely important. If she encountered them, she could not miss them no matter what. I have sent people to other places to ask if there are any traces of these 4 herbs, but these 4 herbs are extremely rare and have not been found. Di Beichen was not surprised by this result. Tiangang sect was rich and powerful, and many herbs found elsewhere could be found in Tiangang sect. Now that even Tiangang sect did not have them, it would not be easy to gather them from other places. We will find them. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. She believed that there was always a way out. Di Beichen nodded, and there was no depression or disappointment in his expression. After experiencing so many changes, he had already trained his mind to be extremely firm. He would not give up easily until the last moment. At night, the depths of the imperial palace were already lively. Palace maids and eunuchs were constantly shuttling around the table. Exquisite snacks, delicious dishes, and sweet and delicious wine were placed one by one on the table, and the rich aroma filled the entire hall. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen arrived, the invited officials had already arrived. The two of them were already late. However, the emperor and the empress had not arrived yet. This was also a habit of the imperial palace. During this time, the civil and military officials could also exchange greetings with each other. Once the emperor and the empress arrived, no matter how much they emphasized that this was a family banquet, everyone could not help but be restrained. With the arrival of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen, there was a moment of silence in the originally noisy hall. Everyone's eyes fell on Prince Chun and Princess Chun, who had been in the limelight recently. Di Baichen was still dressed in a light golden soft robe, dignified and handsome. No one in the entire hall could compare to his extraordinary temperament. Li Yue stared blankly at Di Baichen. Although she already knew that Di Baichen was no longer a cripple, and also knew that Di Baichen had always had an extraordinary temperament, but when she saw him now, she still felt shocked. Such temperament, such elegance, not to mention Crown Prince Xianyuan Huan, even the Emperor Xianyuan Yutian could not compare to him. Such a man was the dream of every young woman. Then he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. She was wearing a long white dress, her body like a willow, her waist like silk, her eyebrows like black, delicate and beautiful. Bailey Hongzhuang had always been a beauty, but when Li Yue saw her again, she only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was more beautiful than before. This seemed to be a kind of temperament. Prince Chun and Princess Chun are really a match made in heaven. I have lived for so long, but I have never seen such a suitable couple. Prince Chun is a dragon among men. Now that he has stood up, it is natural that he has been reborn. An official smiled and turned to look at Li Chengxian beside him. Prime Minister Li has really facilitated a good marriage. Hearing this, Li Chengxian only felt that it was ironic. Previously, he had not facilitated the marriage between Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen with this intention. Chapter 610. Li Yue's hands were tightly clenched under her sleeves. Bailey Hongzhuang was really lucky. In the past, she had always regarded Bailey Yuyin as an opponent and never put Bailey Hongzhuang in her eyes. She never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would actually reach this point. Wife, let's sit down first. Di Baichen unscrupulously held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand and sat down. His voice was gentle, and his posture was so caring that it blinded everyone's eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly, her beautiful face rippling with a faint smile. It was also the imperial banquet, but it was no longer a Hongmin banquet. Bailey Jintao's gaze had been fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang since the moment she appeared. Now that he looked at his own daughter again, he actually had a very strange feeling. The current situation of the general's mansion was bleak. After Bailey Yuyin and Su Wanjing died one after another, only Bailey Jintao and Bailey Haoshuan were left in the huge general's mansion. The previous lively scene was gone forever, and Bailey Jintao had also aged a lot in a short period of time. Father, Bailey Hongzhuang came, but she didn't come to salute you. Bailey Haoshuan's eyes rippled with a malicious light. The reason why his mother and sister died couldn't be separated from Bailey Hongzhuang. This family's disgrace was actually so arrogant and dared to put on airs in front of them. It was really hateful. Bailey Jintao's expression changed a bit. He didn't know why, but after experiencing the previous incident, he felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was unattainable. Forget it, let her be. Bailey Jintao shook his head. All these years, it was indeed him who was harsh to Bailey Hongzhuang and never took care of her. It wasn't strange that Bailey Hongzhuang treated him with such an attitude. Presumably, Bailey Hongzhuang already hated him. These days, he had figured out a lot of things, and his mentality had also changed. Listening to Bailey Jintao's words, Bailey Haoshuan's eyes flashed with a touch of disbelief. He couldn't believe what he just heard was true. Father actually let Bailey Hongzhuang go like this? How could it be? However, Bailey Jintao's appearance of drinking alone proved that what he heard was true. Damn it. He still wanted to avenge his sister. What qualifications did that bitch have to be so arrogant? In the next moment, Bailey Haoxuan stood in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't wait for Bailey Hongzhuang to stop him. Bailey Hongzhuang, for better or for worse, you're still someone from the general's household. Now that you've grown up, you don't want to recognize your family? Isn't that too much? Bailey Haoxuan was the first to speak. His words were not polite at all. Even if others talked about Bailey Hongzhuang's current strength, in his eyes, Bailey Hongzhuang would always be the pitiful worm that he trampled under his feet. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her phoenix eyes slightly, and the corners of her mouth slowly curved into an enchanting smile. So, you want me to call you brother? Bailey Haoxuan's face stiffened. A woman like you is not qualified to be my sister. Deep Bachin gradually frowned after hearing Bailey Haoxuan's words. He was about to speak, but Bailey Hongzhuang stopped him. I have the same idea. Since we don't like each other, let's not force ourselves to be family. Chapter 611. Bailey Haoxuan was slightly startled. His dark and gloomy eyes flashed with doubts and puzzlement. He hadn't seen Bailey Hongzhuang for a few months. Why did he feel that Bailey Hongzhuang was completely different from the past? He actually felt that Bailey Hongzhuang was invulnerable. No matter what he said, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't take it to heart at all. Of course, I don't want to be your family, but my father is also here. You're being too impolite. Bailey Haoxuan proudly raised his chin. She was just a disgrace to the family, but now she was putting on airs here. Let's see how he would tear apart Bailey Hongzhuang's disguise. General Bailey himself didn't say anything. Why did he need to say anything? Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved slightly. Her deep phoenix eyes were filled with coldness. She was clear about what Bailey Haoxuan had done in the past. However, things had changed with the passage of time. She didn't intend to let Bailey Jintao die without descendants. Although Bailey Jintao had never shown her any tenderness over the years, she grew up in the general's mansion after all. Bailey Haoxuan was stunned. His expression changed a little, and he said, I didn't expect you to be so unfilial. Looking at Bailey Haoxuan's stern expression, Bailey Hongzhuang slowly stood up. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, and there was a little provocation between her eyes. I'm like this. What can you do? Bailey Haoxuan was still too naive. This so-called verbal attack had no effect on her at all. Bailey Haoxuan was dumbfounded. He originally thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be a little afraid after he put such a big label on her. He didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to admit it. She admitted it. Was there a mistake? Bailey Hongzhuang was so stubborn. How could he make trouble for her? If you have nothing to say, you can leave. Bailey Hongzhuang sneered. I don't like to see your face. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't go too far. Bailey Haoxuan was really angry. Bailey Hongzhuang was really asking for a beating. What is it? Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly, and the ridicule in her eyes intensified. Bailey Haoxuan, haven't you learned your lesson from breaking your arm last time? Bailey Haoxuan's face suddenly changed. The last time he fought with Bailey Hongzhuang, his arm was directly broken, so he couldn't even participate in the royal hunting competition. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang had been studying at the Azure Water School for so long, he was afraid that her strength was even more powerful. He was not her opponent at all. Scram! Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips parted slightly as she lightly spat out a word. Bailey Haoxuan's eyes were burning with anger, but he had no way to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang. He couldn't win in an argument, and he couldn't win in a fight either. Sending himself up was purely asking for a beating. Even if his heart was very unwilling, Bailey Haoxuan could only stomp his feet angrily and walk back to his original position. He didn't expect that after Bailey Hongzhuang went to the Azure Water School, her means had become a lot better. When Bailey Jintao saw Bailey Haoxuan's situation, he couldn't help but sigh. He drank his wine and didn't say anything else. Master, well done. Xiaohei gave a thumbs up. This was the right way to deal with a guy like Bailey Haoxuan. Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferent. After tonight's banquet, she also planned to explain everything to Bailey Jintao. Chapter 612. In the distance, Li Yue saw that Bailey Hongzhuang left angrily after Bailey Haoshuan walked around in front of Bailey Hongzhuang, and there was some doubt in her eyes. It was a pity that she couldn't hear the conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and Bailey Haoshuan because she was too far away. Bailey Hongzhuang was tasting the snacks calmly, and Li Yue walked slowly toward her. Li Yue was not alone, and there was another woman with outstanding appearance. The woman was wearing a bright red dress, with a proud figure and charming appearance. The collar of her dress was wide open, and one could see her snow-white neck, delicate collarbone, and a trace of exposed snow-white skin. The woman was enchanting and charming as she walked, and most of the men present were attracted by her. Their eyes were fixed on her enchanting body, as if every step she took was on the tip of their hearts, making them feel charming and gentle. "Master, it seems that she is not friendly," Xiao He said vigilantly. Li Yue had always been the enemy of her master, and now she took the initiative to come here. She couldn't find any other reason except to make trouble. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curved into a playful smile. She wanted to see what tricks Li Yue had up her sleeves. Li Yue held the wine cup in her hand and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang provocatively, but she didn't speak to Bailey Hongzhuang but stood in front of Di Beichen. "Prince Chun, congratulations on your recovery. It's really amazing." Li Yue smiled. "I'd like to propose a toast to you." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Yue directly drank the wine in the cup. However, Di Beichen sat upright, his expression slightly indifferent as he looked at her. He clearly remembered the matter of this woman finding trouble with his wife at that time. He was not a forgetful person, and Li Yue would not be a person who sincerely congratulated him. So, Li Yue must have a conspiracy. He also wanted to see what this woman was going to do. Seeing Di Beichen's action, Li Yue's face showed a trace of embarrassment, but soon disappeared, and a smile appeared on her face again. "Prince Chun, this is my distant cousin, Miaoling." Li Yue moved aside slightly to let Miaoling walk in front of her. Miaoling has admired Prince Chun for a long time. "I want to take this opportunity to get to know Prince Chun." There was a hint of pride in Li Yue's eyes. Miaoling's every move, frown, and smile had an unconcealable charm to men. She noticed that all the men present were interested in Miaoling. Di Beichen was also a man, and she believed that Di Beichen was no exception. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were already married, she still had to find ways to make Bailey Hongzhuang unhappy. The most unpleasant thing for a woman was when her husband fell in love with another woman. She deliberately found such a beautiful woman like Miaoling just to give her to Di Beichen. With her understanding of men, she believed that no man would refuse such a gift. She wanted to see how Bailey Hongzhuang could still be arrogant now. When the men present saw Li Yue send Miaoling to Di Beichen, a trace of disappointment appeared in their eyes. They would definitely take good care of such a charming woman when they brought her back. However, since Li Yue gave her to Prince Chun, they had no hope. Damn, this Li Yue is too shameless. Chapter 613. Bai Shi, who was in Bailey Hongzhuang's arms, also flapped its two claws, wanting to twist Li Yue's head off. "Don't be impatient." Bailey Hongzhuang stroked Bai Shi's fur, and her sharp eyes were filled with a trace of coldness. Li Yue's actions had succeeded in provoking her anger. Li Yue glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang proudly. She wanted to see Bailey Hongzhuang suffer. Bai Shi looked at Li Yue with hatred. Although its little paws had calmed down, its heart was not calm at all. Miaoling's face flashed with joy. Although she was not Li Yue's real cousin, as Li Yue said, she admired Prince Chun very much. When Li Yue found her, she didn't have any expectations for her. But at this moment, after knowing that it was Prince Chun, her heart became hot. Such a handsome man. If it was in the past, she would not even have the chance to touch him. But now she was going to become Prince Chun's woman? Thinking of this, Miaoling could not hide the excitement in her eyes. At that time, there would be many young women who would envy her. "Prince Chun, my daughter, Miaoling, has admired you for a long time." Miaoling bowed slowly, her head slightly lowered, her cheeks flushed, and her small eyes were full of love. Even though she was a woman, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but praise. Such charm was indeed a stunner. However, most of these stunners could only be reduced to others' playthings. The smile on Li Yue's lips widened. Prince Chen, what do you think? Hearing this, Di Beichen's lips curled up slightly, and he glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang with a faint smile. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged, indicating that he could do whatever he wanted. Li Yue looked at Di Beichen's actions and thought that Di Beichen wanted to take Miaoling into Prince Chen's mansion, but was worried that Bailey Hongzhuang would mind. Princess Chen, Prince Chen only has you as his princess so far. There are too few people serving him. You won't object, will you? Li Yue's words were filled with sarcasm. Now that everyone was watching, she didn't believe that Bailey Hongzhuang would dare to say no. Otherwise, if this were to spread, it would be extremely detrimental to Bailey Hongzhuang's reputation. I've always heard that Prince Chen and Princess Chen have a very good relationship. Now that Li Yue has made such a scene, I wonder how Princess Chen will deal with it. Of course, he can't refuse. It's normal for a man to have multiple wives, not to mention that Prince Chen is a prince. No man would reject such a beauty, huh? All the men present began to laugh. As men, they deeply felt the same way about this. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged. Since you're doing this for His Highness, you only need to ask His Highness. Li Yue's eyes lit up. In this way, Bailey Hongzhuang had given in, and this matter was even more certain. Prince Chen, Princess Consort Chen doesn't have any objections. In that case, please take good care, my cousin. Li Yue's smile became even brighter. When she thought that Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't do anything about it, she felt a burst of joy. However, just as Li Yue and Miaoling were overjoyed, Di Beichen's voice stunned them on the spot. Miss Li, it's precious that you can have this kind of heart. I hope that after you marry the crown prince in the future, you can think more about the crown prince. Di Beichen's lips curled into an evil smile, but his eyes were full of indifference. Chapter 614. As soon as these words came out, Li Yue's expression instantly froze, and the smug smile on her face also seemed a little funny. Prince Chen, what do you mean by this? Li Yue asked, as if she didn't believe what she had heard before. A beauty like Miaoling, as long as it was a man, he would not refuse. How could Di Beichen be an exception? Miaoling was also stunned, and the shyness on her face turned into shame and anger. She had expressed it so straightforwardly, and if she was still rejected by Prince Chen, she, as a girl, would be really embarrassed. I don't need anyone except my princess. Di Beichen repeated his words with a cold face. There was no warmth in his cold and resolute words. Di Beichen's face was indifferent. He only had Bailey Hongzhuang in his heart. Except for Bailey Hongzhuang, the other women were all pink skeletons. If Miss Li likes to take care of this kind of thing, why don't you take care of it for the crown prince? In my opinion, it is very suitable for your distant cousin to marry the crown prince with you. As for the matters of my Prince Chen's mansion, you don't need to worry about it. As Di Beichen's voice fell, all the civil and military officials present were stunned, and their faces were filled with astonishment. Originally, it should be a good thing for Li Yue to send a beauty to Prince Chen. Who would have thought that Prince Chen would refuse with a cold face? However, what Prince Chen said also made some sense. Li Yue was just an unmarried young lady. Now she actually began to take care of Prince Chen's back garden, which was a bit too much. Li Yue's expression was ugly, which was a sharp contrast to her previous complacency. Prince Chen, I'm just being kind. Li Yue explained. Miaoling will definitely be able to serve you well. The evil smile on Di Beichen's lips rose a little. He looked at Miaoling for a moment and raised his eyebrows. Is this kind of woman worthy? Li Yue's face was livid. Di Beichen's words had obviously rejected all possibilities. She didn't understand. Miaoling was a beauty from any point of view. Why did she become unworthy in Di Beichen's eyes? Miaoling wasn't worthy, but Bailey Hongzhuang was worthy? Miaoling's eyes were red, and she looked at Di Beichen with shame and anger. She was originally sincere, but now she was despised by Di Beichen. What should she do? Li Chengqian was also surprised. Of you, As long as Miaoling married into Prince Chen's mansion, she would have many opportunities to sow discord between Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. This was a trick that would work on any other man, but now it had actually failed. There wasn't even a process, and Di Bei Chun directly refused. Ha! Di Bei Chun is really domineering, Xiao He said excitedly. Well said, I like it. Xiao Bai also clapped her hands and cheered. For this kind of trick, it should be used in such a way to slap the face. At this moment, Baisher was no longer struggling, comfortably nestling in Bailey Hongzhuang's arms. This hateful woman, he didn't even need to make a move to make her lose face. Prince Chun, even if you have a noble status, isn't it too much to say such words? Li Yue said in a deep voice. No matter what, she was still the miss of the Prime Minister's mansion. Di Beichun didn't leave her any face at all. I've always spoken too much. If Miss Li can't bear it, then stay away from me. Chapter 6:15. Looking at Di Beichun's arrogant behavior, Li Yue's eyes were filled with anger. She had never seen Di Beichun as such an indifferent person before. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was really so charming that Di Beichun had rejected the temptation of all women after being with Bailey Hongzhuang? Turning her gaze slightly, Li Yue couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a playful smile as she looked at Li Yue mockingly. From the moment Li Yue came to her provocatively, Li Yue was destined to be humiliated. Bailey Hongzhuang, don't be too complacent, Li Yue said coldly. Bailey Hongzhuang's phoenix eyes rose slightly, her smile still the same as before. Li Yue, you're so concerned about my matters. You can rest assured that when the Crown Prince arrives, I will also properly propose this matter to him. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Li Yue's face turned ugly, and a bad premonition arose in her heart. Could it be that Bailey Hongzhuang was going to use the same trick on her? Thinking of this, Li Yue's heart tightened. The Crown Prince had not married her yet. How could she give such a bewitching woman like Miaoling to the Crown Prince? Bailey Hongzhuang, don't you dare have such ideas. It's impossible, Li Yue said fiercely. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged indifferently, and her expression was full of indifference. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, Li Yue's mind raced. No matter what, she could not let Bailey Hongzhuang use the same trick to take revenge on her. Li Yue immediately turned and left with Miaoling. She had to take Miaoling out of the palace before the Crown Prince arrived. However, at this moment, the eunuch's voice rang out. The Emperor has arrived. The Empress has arrived. The Crown Prince has arrived. The sharp voice caused Li Yue to stop in her tracks. She couldn't help but feel a trace of panic in her heart. The civil and military officials also stood up and respectfully bowed to the Emperor and the others. The Emperor, Empress, and His Highness the Crown Prince sat on the main dais under everyone's gaze. The Emperor and Empress sat in the middle, while Xinyuan Huan sat slightly to the side. Greetings, Your Majesty, Empress, and Your Highness the Crown Prince. Everyone said respectfully, You may rise. A warm smile appeared on Xinyuan Yutian's face. However, that dragon's might was still unconsciously being emitted, causing the atmosphere in the entire hall to be suppressed. Today's banquet is held to congratulate the Crown Prince, Chun Wang, and Qin Wang Fei on their return from Kanglan College. Everyone, please enjoy yourselves. Xinyuan Yutian couldn't help but look at Di Beichun on his left. After half a year, he was shocked to see Di Beichun again. Although Di Beichun's appearance hadn't changed much compared to before, the light shining in his eyes was completely different. The faint confidence and momentum he exuded were no different from the proud sons of heaven he had seen before. Now that he was facing Di Beichun again, there was a trace of awe in his heart. Listening to Xinyuan Yutian's words, all the officials had some doubts in their hearts. At this time, he only needed to say that it was a celebration for the Crown Prince. Why did he bring Qin Wang and Chun Wang Fei together? Although Chun Wang and Qin Wang Fei were now students of Kanglan College, their status in the imperial city was not very good. One was the trash of the general's mansion, the former crown princess, and the other was the long-rumored illegitimate child. Chapter 616. Not only Xian Yuan Yutian, but Jiang Jining and Xian Yuan Huan also couldn't help but look at Di Beichen. In fact, today's banquet was completely held for Di Beichen, and Di Beichen was the real protagonist. Li Yue's eyes fell on Xian Yuan Huan, and her black eyes were filled with love. She had been in love with Xian Yuan Huan for a long time, and now she finally became the crown princess, but she had been separated from Xian Yuan Huan for such a long time. Seeing Xian Yuan Huan again today, her heart couldn't help but beat faster. After exchanging a look with Jiang Jining, Xian Yuan Huan walked down from above and slowly walked in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. Li Yue saw Xian Yuan Huan approaching and only thought that he came over because he saw her. Her heart beat more and more violently, and her eyes were full of love and hope. Unexpectedly, Xian Yuan Huan didn't even look at her and directly stood in front of Di Beichen. Prince Chun. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Xian Yuan Huan in front of him with a lazy and wanton posture. Since Xian Yuan Huan walked down from the main seat, everyone carefully paid attention to Xian Yuan Huan's movements. However, when they saw Xian Yuan Huan standing in front of Di Beichen and Di Beichen still sitting and not getting up, their faces changed. This Prince Chun is too bold. The crown prince is here in person, and he still dares to have such an attitude. He really doesn't know etiquette. Even if Prince Chun and the crown prince are classmates in Kanglan College, they're not here. Xian Yuan Jing's eyes showed a trace of coldness. Di Beichen is really looking for his own death. This Xian Yuan Jing was the Jing Wangye who pushed Di Beichen down the stairs and hung himself in the air. Because of that incident, he lost face and didn't appear in front of everyone for a long time. It was also because of that incident that he hated Di Beichen more and more. Crown Prince, is there something you need from me? Di Beichen said lightly. He didn't have a good impression of Xian Yuan Huan. Most of the humiliation he suffered in Fengbo country was from Xian Yuan Huan. Prince Chun, you dare to have such an attitude towards the crown prince. Do you want to die? Li Yue was the first to stand out. Hers crown prince was the future emperor of Fengbo country, and Prince Chun, a mere illegitimate son, dared to be arrogant in front of the crown prince. He was simply looking for death. Xian Yuan Huan was thinking about how to properly apologize to Di Beichen when Li Yu's sudden action startled him. Carefully looking at Di Beichen's expression, seeing that Di Beichen was not angry, Xian Yuan Huan coldly said to Li Yu, Miss Li, this matter has nothing to do with you. Crown Prince, Prince Chen's attitude is offending his superiors. He should be dragged out and beaten 50 times. Li Yu's tone was a little anxious. The previous incident had made her very unhappy with Di Beichen. Now that Di Beichen was so rebellious, she could take this opportunity to teach Di Beichen a lesson. Bailey Hongzhuang's smile gradually widened. It seemed that Xian Yuan Huan had already known the origin of the resentment, and now he came to apologize to Di Beichen. Li Yu's obstruction at this time was tantamount to suicide. Crown Prince, the Crown Princess said that I should be beaten 50 times. Chapter 617. What I said is the truth. This is already a light punishment for your rebellious behavior. Li Yue puffed out her chest, her eyes filled with pride. Who told Di Beichen to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit? She was going to make Di Beichen regret. Xian Yuan Huan's temples couldn't help but throb. Li Yue was really an idiot. He was now trying to please Di Beichen, but Li Yue still wanted to punish Di Beichen. Slap! With a crisp sound, a loud slap fell on Li Yu's face. Xian Yuan Huan's face was full of disgust. I told you to shut up. Didn't you hear me? This unforeseen event made everyone present open their mouths wide. His Highness the Crown Prince's reaction was too strange. Li Yue was right. His Highness the Crown Prince actually slapped Li Yue in front of everyone. What's wrong with His Highness the Crown Prince? Why is he so polite to Prince Chun? I don't know. He actually slapped the Crown Princess for Prince Chun. It's really puzzling. Li Yue was also stunned by this slap. If it wasn't for the burning pain from her cheek, she wouldn't dare to believe what had happened in front of her. An indescribable sense of humiliation spread in Li Yu's heart. First, she was ridiculed by Di Beichen in public, and now she was slapped by the crown prince. She had become the object of everyone's ridicule. Li Qingqian's face became ugly. He didn't understand what Li Yuyue had done to provoke the crown prince. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, how can you treat me like this?" Li Yuyue's eyes were red, and tears were forming in her eyes. However, Li Yuyue was slapped before, and now she was speaking. The veil on her face quietly fell to the ground. Wow! After seeing Li Yuyue's real face, everyone was in an uproar, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Li Yuyue's fair and delicate face was covered with freckles, which completely covered her original beauty. If one looked closely, they would only feel a burst of nausea. How is this the outstanding beauty of the Prime Minister's manner? She was an ugly woman with a face full of freckles. Earlier, I heard that Miss Li had a lot of freckles on her face for some reason, but I thought it wasn't very serious. Now that I see it, it's simply too ugly. How can someone with this kind of appearance be a model for the mother of the world? If other countries see this, they will think that there are no beautiful women in our Fombo country. No wonder Miss Li has been wearing a veil all this time. Such a face is really disgusting. Everyone's eyes fell on Li Yuyue. During this period of time, everyone had been full of curiosity about Li Yuyue's face. Now that they saw it, they were really emotional. Li Yuyue didn't notice it at first, but after hearing everyone's discussion, her face instantly surged with embarrassment. Her cheeks turned red, and she was ashamed and resentful. Xianyuan Huan was also stunned. Even if he guessed that the problem on Li Yuyue's face might be very serious, he didn't think it would be serious to this extent. Looking at such a face, he was afraid that he wouldn't even be able to eat, let alone take it back. Li Yuyue quickly picked up the veil and put it on her face. Facing everyone's gaze, she really wanted to find a hole to hide in. Miss Li's face has become like this. She definitely can't be Huan Er's crown princess. Jiang Jining quickly said after being shocked for a moment. Chapter 618. Li Qingqian's face suddenly changed. He felt Xianyuan Yutian's anger. In order to avoid Yu Er's status as crown princess being abolished, he had been hiding this matter and looking for a cure at the same time. He didn't expect that today he would be completely exposed. The emperor would not let him go easily. Li Yuyue hurriedly took Miaoling back to her original seat. Her head couldn't be lower, but she could still feel everyone's eyes on her. Xianyuan Huan didn't care where Li Yuyue went at all. He turned to Di Beichun and said, "Prince Chun, I apologize for what I did before." The next moment, Xianyuan Huan bowed deeply to Di Beichun with a sincere attitude. "I was stupid and ignorant before. I humiliated and made things difficult for you. I hope you can forgive me." When everyone saw Xianyuan Huan apologize to Di Beichun so sincerely, they looked as if they had seen a ghost. It was really incredible. Xianyuan Huan was a dignified crown prince. How could he apologize to Di Beichun so humbly? Cough, cough. Xianyuan Jing choked on his tea. His eyes widened. What was going on today? Did the sun rise from the west? While everyone was shocked, they couldn't help but look at the emperor and empress sitting above. However, the emperor and empress looked indifferent. Obviously, they acquiesced to the crown prince's behavior. What a ghost. Di Beichun looked at Xianyuan Huan indifferently and didn't speak. It was this silent gaze that made Xianyuan Huan's forehead ooze with cold sweat. If you think that what I did is unforgivable, just kill me. I only hope that you can forgive father and mother. They were also forced. A touch of surprise appeared in Bailey Hongzhuang's dark eyes. She only felt that Xianyuan Huan at this time was still like a man. With Xianyuan Huan's voice fell, the whole hall was silent for a moment. Everyone's mouth was wide open. It was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Anyone who saw the current situation understood the seriousness of the situation. If there was no reason, Xianyuan Huan would never do such a thing. Thinking about it carefully, everyone understood that Di Beichun wasn't the emperor's illegitimate child. Otherwise, Xianyuan Huan wouldn't have any reason to be so humble. If that was the case, then Di Beichun's identity would be terrifying. Bailey Haoshuan's eyes widened. The situation had changed too quickly. He simply couldn't accept it. Could it be that Di Beichun's status was even nobler than the crown prince's? Then if Bailey Hongzhuang was Deep Beichen's wife, wouldn't that mean? Deep Beichen stared at Xianyuan Huan for a long time. When Xianyuan Huan's whole body was about to sink into an ice cellar, he finally spoke. I don't care how you treat me, but I won't forgive what you did to my wife. Xianyuan Huan's childish actions in the past were nothing in his eyes. If he wanted to resist, Xianyuan Huan would have died countless times already. The reason why he endured the humiliation was just to let those people relax their vigilance. As for Xianyuan Yutian, he didn't feel anything. After all, this matter wasn't something that the ruler of a small dynasty could decide. He came back this time not to avenge himself, but to help his wife vent her anger. For more than 10 years, Bailey Hongzhuang's life was so sad that he also felt extremely distressed. Chapter 619. Bailey Hongzhuang turned her eyes to look at the outstanding man beside her. Her heart was filled with a kind of emotion called being moved. He was so handsome and talented, yet he specially made a trip back to Fengbo country just to help her get justice. She had always thought that Di Beichen came back to Fengbo to wash away the humiliation he had suffered, but now it seemed that she had guessed wrong. With Di Beichen's mind, he didn't put Xianyuan Huan's previous actions in his eyes. He only felt sorry for the humiliation and trampling he had suffered in Fengbo. Xianyuan Huan was stunned. He thought that Di Beichen wouldn't let him go, but he never thought that Di Beichen would say such words. Looking over, he saw Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes filled with emotion. He suddenly understood why Bailey Hongzhuang would choose Di Beichen between him and Di Beichen without hesitation. It must be known that Bailey Hongzhuang also didn't know Di Beichen's identity. Di Beichen was just a useless, crippled prince, while he was the high and mighty crown prince. Just this point alone made him unable to compare with Di Beichen. So the only woman who took root in his heart became Di Beichen's woman. In an instant, everyone's eyes focused on Bailey Hongzhuang. Even if the emperor, empress, and crown prince didn't say it, they all knew that Di Beichen was not a simple person. Obviously, Di Beichen came here today to help Bailey Hongzhuang vent her anger. Li Yue's face was as white as paper. At this moment, she finally understood why His Highness the Crown Prince had treated her like that. Di Beichen's identity was above His Highness the Crown Prince. How is this possible? A feeling of disbelief spread through her heart. The crippled prince that everyone had ridiculed in the past had actually changed and reached such a height in a single shake of his body. She and her father had conspired together to frame Bailey Hongzhuang and push her to such a high position. The most important thing was that Prince Chun doted on Bailey Hongzhuang so much. First, he said that he only wanted Bailey Hongzhuang, and now he came back to Fengbo for Bailey Hongzhuang, just to let her vent her anger. What kind of love was this? How envious was this? His hands under his sleeves were clenched into fists, and his nails were deeply embedded in his palms, dripping with blood. If it had been anything else, it would have been fine. However, all of this had happened because of her. She had originally wanted Bailey Hongzhuang to fall into the dust and be trampled on by everyone. She had never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would become a bright pearl, shining brightly. Li Qingqian's face was also extremely ugly. This huge contrast was simply unbelievable. A crow turning into a phoenix, this rare chance had actually appeared in front of his eyes. Bailey Jintao suddenly stood up, and there was nothing but shock on his usually dignified face. He was already extremely regretful. Now that he saw Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen, he was so regretful that he didn't know what to say. He was a real idiot. He actually mistook a pheasant for a phoenix and a real phoenix for a pheasant. He didn't dare to imagine that if he had always treated Bailey Hongzhuang well, then what kind of glory would the general's residence have now? With Di Beichen as his son-in-law, how difficult would it be for him to take over Fengbo? However, everything that should have belonged to him was destroyed by his own hands. Chapter 620. Xianyuan Huan turned around and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Over the years, he really felt guilty towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Once upon a time, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at him with adoration, but he hooked up with Bailey Yuyan and even wished for Bailey Hongzhuang to die many times. In the next moment, Under everyone's horrified gaze, Xin Yuan Huan knelt down in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. He felt guilty towards Bailey Hongzhuang. In order to break off the engagement, he insulted Bailey Hongzhuang many times and even treated her as a joke, a stain that can't be erased. It was because of his attitude that Bailey Hongzhuang had such a difficult time in the general's mansion. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang saving him, he would have died long ago. So, he was willing to kneel down. "I'm sorry." Xin Yuan Huan's voice was loud and apologetic. In the past, he was such a bastard, but after experiencing all kinds of things, he felt that he couldn't continue to be so muddle-headed. Although he knelt down in front of Bailey Hongzhuang, he felt that his life was upright. Everyone was stunned, and the whole hall was dead silent. If this scene were spread out, no one would believe it. Xin Yuan Jing's legs were also trembling. In the past, he was also sarcastic towards Bailey Hongzhuang. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang has made a name for herself, he didn't know if she would deal with him. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was calm, her indifferent eyes looking at Xin Yuan Huan. This man, she originally hated. If it wasn't for Xin Yuan Huan, even if the former Bailey Hongzhuang didn't have a good life in the family, she wouldn't have swallowed gold and committed suicide. Therefore, Xin Yuan Huan owed the former Bailey Hongzhuang his life. Later, the things that Xin Yuan Huan did changed her view of him. Bailey Yiyan died in her hands, but Xin Yuan Huan didn't say anything about it. Undoubtedly, he didn't want to cause trouble for her. After experiencing so many things, she also lost some of her indignation, leaving only indifference. She can see that Xin Yuan Huan is sincerely remorseful. The past has already happened, and it can't be reversed. Now, she doesn't care about all of this anymore. The only thing she cares about is the man beside her who is willing to shelter her from the wind and rain. As for everything in the past, let it end here. Xin Yuan Huan stared at Bailey Hongzhuang. If Bailey Hongzhuang wanted to kill him, he wouldn't say a single word. Turning her eyes slightly, Bailey Hongzhuang saw the emperor and empress sitting high above. Xin Yuan Yutian and Jiang Jinying's faces were also full of regret. If Di Bei-chun was treated like that in Fengbo country, it was because they were helpless. But Bailey Hongzhuang can't find any reason to cover up their mistakes. If they didn't break off the engagement, Bailey Hongzhuang's life wouldn't have plummeted. Forget it, you get up. Bailey Hongzhuang's red lips are slightly opened. Her deep eyes are calm and indifferent. That indifferent appearance is as if Xin Yuan Huan in front of her is just a stranger. When the ministers present heard Bailey Hongzhuang's answer, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Bailey Hongzhuang forgave His Highness the Crown Prince. Otherwise, if they really did fight, they really don't know how to clean up the mess. However, after seeing the indifference in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, Xin Yuan Huan's heart sank. If Bailey Hongzhuang hates him, then at least she still has him in her heart. Chapter 621. Di Bei-chun's eyebrows revealed some surprise. Bailey Hongzhuang had suffered so much humiliation over the years, but now she was going to let it go so easily? But when Di Bei-chun saw Bailey Hongzhuang's expression, he understood. The reason why Bailey Hongzhuang made such a decision was not because of anything else, but because she had let it go. After truly letting it go, there was nothing to care about. Even if Xin Yuan Huan died in front of her, she wouldn't feel anything. Perhaps, compared to her angrily punishing everyone, this was a scene he was more willing to see. Immersed in the original pain, Bailey Hongzhuang wouldn't be happy. Only after letting it go would there be a new tomorrow. Xin Yuan Huan slowly stood up. Bailey Hongzhuang was so magnanimous to let him go, making him feel even more ashamed. He was originally a bit older than Bailey Hongzhuang, but he couldn't compare to Bailey Hongzhuang in any way. He was really ashamed. Suddenly, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes fell on Li Yuyue, who wasn't far away. During this period of time, Xin Yuan Huan hadn't made trouble for her, but since this Li Yuyue liked to make things difficult for her, if she didn't fight back, then it wouldn't be her style. Feeling Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze, Li Yuyue's heart gradually sank. How could she be so unlucky? If she had known Bailey Hongzhuang's identity was completely different, she would never have made trouble for herself today. But she wasn't a prophet, so she didn't have the foresight. I think the crown princess's appearance is too ugly, completely unsuitable for you. How about you abolish her? How about it? Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows slightly raised. The corners of her mouth hooked up in an enchanting and playful smile as she looked at Xin Yuanhuan. Since Li Yuyue wanted to be the crown princess so much, she would make sure that Li Yuyue couldn't be the crown princess. Trying to ruin her relationship with Di Beichun was absolutely unforgivable. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes fell on Li Yuyue. Li Yuyue's face, under the veil, quickly turned pale. Hearing this, Xin Yuanhuan nodded without hesitation. Okay. Li Yuyue's body trembled, and her face turned ashen. She had waited for so long to become the crown princess. Now, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's words, all her efforts had gone down the drain. Unfortunately, she was the one who did all of this. If she hadn't provoked Bailey Hongzhuang today, perhaps the situation wouldn't have become so serious. In my opinion, this prime minister is also muddle-headed and tyrannical, Di Beichun said casually. Li Qingqian's face immediately changed, and an indescribable panic spread through his heart. Yuer had already been stripped of her status as crown princess. She couldn't implicate him. However, after hearing Di Beichun's words, Xin Yuan Yutian said without hesitation, Men, abolish Li Qingqian's prime minister position and demote him to a commoner. The guards immediately walked into the main hall, took off Li Qingqian's black veil hat, and dragged him out of the main hall. Your Majesty, this official. As he was dragged out, Li Qingqian shouted unwillingly. But no one was in the mood to listen to what he said. Since Li Qingqian was demoted to a commoner, Li Yuyue naturally had no reason to continue staying here. Instantly, Li Yuyue and Miaoling were also driven out of the main hall. Thinking about it, this was the last time they would enter the imperial palace in this lifetime. Chapter 622. The imperial banquet ended in everyone's shock. Xin Yuan Yutian sealed the mouths of all the ministers and forbade them from talking about what happened at the banquet. Di Beichun's identity was extraordinary, and they all understood the seriousness of it. They also understood that what happened at the banquet tonight was reasonable. For a moment, although the civil and military officials kept their mouths shut, they told their families not to offend Prince Chun and Princess Chen no matter what. After the banquet, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun went to the general's mansion together. In Bailey Hongzhuang's memory, this place had never brought her a moment of joy, and all the memories were unbearable to recall. It seemed that this was the last time she would come here. After today, her relationship with the general's mansion would come to an end. Obviously, Bailey Jintao did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang to come. He rubbed his eyes to make sure that he was not hallucinating. He wanted to say something, but he did not know where to start. He knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was proud of him, but he was grateful that Bailey Hongzhuang did not make things difficult for him at the banquet tonight. Otherwise, he would not end up better than Li Qingqian. Bailey Hongzhuang, why are you here? At this moment, Bailey Haoshuan did not dare to be disrespectful to Bailey Hongzhuang. Otherwise, as long as Di Beichun said a word, he would lose his life. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Bailey Haoshuan lightly, but ignored him. She turned to Di Beichun beside her and said, Wait for me here for a moment. Di Beichun nodded slightly and said, Go ahead. She knew Bailey Hongzhuang's plan. The reason why she did not make things difficult for Bailey Jintao today was that she grew up in the general's mansion, and it was mainly because of Qin Yayun. Bailey Haoshuan's face was a little pale. Bailey Hongzhuang ignored him, but he did not dare to say anything. General Bailey, let's go inside, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Hearing the way Bailey Hongzhuang addressed him, Bailey Jintao knew that Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't forgiven him. His face revealed some disappointment, completely different from his previous high-spirited self. Okay, inside the room. Bailey Hongzhuang sat across from Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Jintao, who had always been stern towards Bailey Hongzhuang, was now somewhat uncomfortable. Even he himself was not aware of this change. The atmosphere was slightly silent. Bailey Hongzhuang was the first to speak. General Bailey, I'm here today to tell you something. Bailey Jintao nodded. Speak. Actually, I'm not your daughter. As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's face abruptly changed. Thinking of all the differences between Bailey Hongzhuang and the past, could it be that the woman in front of him wasn't the real Hongzhuang? Then who are you? Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand and said, General Bailey, don't misunderstand. I'm the real Bailey Hongzhuang. It's just that I'm not your child. Back then, Madame Qin pretended to be pregnant in order to win your favor. In fact, she didn't have a child. I'm just her adopted child. How is this possible? Bailey Jintao looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. He did not dare to believe that Bailey Hongzhuang was telling the truth. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was indifferent. You didn't visit Madame Qin after she was pregnant, so you didn't see through this lie. In fact, I only found out about this when I was organizing Madame Qin's belongings. Chapter 623. Bailey Jintao fell into silence. Bailey Hongzhuang's words made him unable to refute. In fact, as Bailey Hongzhuang said, when Qin Yeyun was pregnant, he did not pay much attention to it until Bailey Hongzhuang was born. It was entirely possible that Qin Yeyun had concealed this matter. As Bailey Hongzhuang said, Qin Yeyun did not have to write such a lie in the diary. Then there was only one possibility. This was the truth. No matter what, I grew up in the General's mansion for more than 10 years. I hope that General Bailey can live a good life. I believe that the royal family will not mistreat you for Di Beichen's sake. You and I are strangers now. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was indifferent and calm. She really did not have any feelings for Bailey Jintao. In the past 10 years, although they were father and daughter in name, they did not have the slightest interaction. If it were not for Qin Yeyun, what would happen to the General's mansion in the future would have nothing to do with her. Where her voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang had already stood up. Without saying anything more, she directly walked out of the room. She and Bailey Jintao were like strangers, and there was nothing to talk about. Bailey Jintao looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's back as she left. He did not see the diary left by Qin Yeyun with his own eyes, so he did not know whether what Bailey Hongzhuang said was true or not. However, he was sure that Bailey Hongzhuang would have nothing to do with the General's mansion in the future. All of this was destroyed by his own hands. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang leave with Di Beichen so quickly, Bailey Haoshuan could not help but run into the room and ask, Father, what did Bailey Hongzhuang say to you? Bailey Jintao waved his hand, as if he had aged again in an instant. She will not come back in the future. Hearing this, Bailey Haoshuan was stunned. Now that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were so outstanding, he wanted to use their limelight to develop his career. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang had nothing to do with the General's mansion. Bailey Haoshuan's wishful thinking was ruined just like that, and his expression turned ugly. Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang walked on the street. There were very few people on the street, and their shadows were elongated under the moonlight. His big hand held Bailey Hongzhuang's small hand tightly. Di Beichen asked, Di Beichen, how do you feel? His Highness, Haoshuan's heart's His Majesty, Hongzhuang SS mansion. Or not. Both. Di Beichen stared into Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes. He only hoped that Bailey Hongzhuang was happy, but he could feel the disappointment in Bailey Hongzhuang's heart. My mood at the banquet was naturally very good. The humiliation I suffered over the years was completely vented today. Bailey Hongzhuang chuckled. From then on, she was no longer the miss of the General's mansion who was ridiculed and trampled on everywhere. She had become a person that everyone looked up to. As for the General's mansion, I don't belong there. It's just that things have changed, and I feel a little more emotional. She had all of Bailey Hongzhuang's memories, but she was not Bailey Hongzhuang after all. She could not really empathize with Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, she only sighed for the former Bailey Hongzhuang. She did not know how Bailey Hongzhuang would feel after knowing everything today. As for herself, she was still full of hope. The path she would take in the future was what she cared about the most. Chapter 624. The next day, the sun was just right, the sky was high, and the clouds were light. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen packed up and left Feng Bo country. This place didn't have much meaning for them now. The school holidays were only for a month. They had already spent half a month here and stayed here for 5 days. Now it was time to return to Azure Water School. Ji Wenbin, Dong Sairu, and Du Tianxuo all came to send them off. They faintly felt that after Bailey Hongzhuang left, she wouldn't be coming back in a short period of time. After waving goodbye, Bailey Hongzhuang gracefully turned around, valiantly riding her horse away. Ji Wenbin and the other two looked at the two figures galloping away, their hearts full of blessings. They didn't know what realm Bailey Hongzhuang would reach the next time they saw Bailey Hongzhuang. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichan returned to Azure Water School, the school was already bustling again. Many students had already returned, and even more students hadn't left before. He Mu appeared in front of Di Beichan. "Young master." Di Beichan nodded slightly. What happened? He Mu had been by his side for a long time. If it wasn't for something important, He Mu wouldn't appear in front of him and Bailey Hongzhuang without permission. During this time, he only wanted to enjoy some private time with Bailey Hongzhuang. He didn't want another pair of eyes beside them, so He Mu didn't follow them back to Fengbo country. Hearing this, He Mu couldn't help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang. His expression was a bit more hesitant. Di Beichan waved his hand. "Say it." There shouldn't be any secrets between him and Bailey Hongzhuang. He also didn't have anything to hide. Something happened in Tiangang sect. Miss Han was very dissatisfied with what happened in the ruins. Those people are getting restless again. He Mu's face revealed some helplessness. In fact, the young master had been staying at Azure Water School for a long time, and the people of Tiangang Zone had already complained. In addition, we've inquired about the 9th grade purple zoysia. However, if young master doesn't appear, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for us to obtain it. A hint of contemplation appeared in Di Beichan's eyes. Those people from the Tiangang sect were already restless. Once he left, he was afraid that they would think of ways to make trouble again. It was just that he did not know when his master would return. When his master returned, the situation should be much better. "Beichan, go ahead," Bailey Hongzhuang said. "I'm not in any danger at the Azure Water School. You don't have to worry about me. The 9th grade purple zoysia is very important. You must find a way to get it." She believed that Di Beichan would be able to deal with the problems of Tiangang sect. After all, Di Beichan had been silent for 3 years and had settled everything in just a few months. Now that he had only left for a few months, what waves could those people from the Tiangang sect make? She was more concerned about the 9th grade purple zoysia. These were treasures that could only be encountered by chance. It was rare to see one, so naturally she couldn't let it go. Di Beichan looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang, a little worry between his brows. "Why don't you come with me?" He didn't feel at ease leaving Bailey Hongzhuang here alone. If she encountered any danger, he could. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment, but shook her head, a gentle smile spreading from the corners of her mouth. Chapter 6:25. She understood that with how outstanding Di Beichan was, those people who wanted to deal with Di Beichan were definitely not simple people. If Di Beichan went alone, then he would be invulnerable. But if she went with him, then she would become Di Beichan's weak spot. She naturally didn't want to become Di Beichan's weak spot. What she wanted was to stand by Di Beichan's side openly without fear of any threats or challenges. She didn't want to rely on Di Beichan for protection. That was her pride as the head of the Bailey family, and also the pride in her heart. Her pride made her unwilling to become an accessory. She wanted to rely on her own strength to create a world for herself. She believed that it wouldn't be long before Han Shilling would no longer have any sense of pride in front of her, because she would completely crush the confidence of those cultivators who were originally unusually arrogant in front of her. Di Beichan looked deeply at Bailey Hongzhuang. He saw Bailey Hongzhuang's unyielding spirit. That was her unique pride, burning hot and strong, firm and resolute. If Bailey Hongzhuang had given him some other reason, perhaps he would have rejected her. But the reason that Bailey Hongzhuang had given him made him unable to find an excuse to reject her, because that was Bailey Hongzhuang's pride and obsession. How could he let Bailey Hongzhuang give up? As long as he truly loved Bailey Hongzhuang, he would never let Bailey Hongzhuang give up. In reality, After knowing Bailey Hongzhuang for a long time, he had long understood the pride in his wife's bones. Even if it wasn't obvious on normal days, that was only because she had never deliberately shown it. He believed that it wouldn't be long before Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to stand by his side openly. Heimu stared at Bailey Hongzhuang in amazement. He had long known that Bailey Hongzhuang was different from ordinary girls. It was because of this that the young master had a whole new level of respect for her. However, when he heard Miss Bailey's words, he couldn't help but feel admiration. Originally, he was worried that the young master's devotion to Miss Bailey would drag down his development. Now, it seemed that the situation was not like this at all. Just from Miss Bailey's words, one could feel her lofty aspirations. All right, Di Beichen put his hands on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders. I'll settle the riot in Tiangang sect and get the 9th grade purple Ganoderma. Then I'll come back to find you. Di Beichen stared at Bailey Hongzhuang's pitch-black almond-shaped eyes, as if he wanted to imprint Bailey Hongzhuang in his heart. This was a short separation, and it wouldn't be long before he returned. However, right now, he was unwilling to part with Bailey Hongzhuang. He believed that his wife would understand his reluctance. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, and a warm and beautiful smile appeared on her lips. I'll wait for you to come back. If two people had feelings for each other for a long time, why would they stay together day and night? Azure Water School's cultivation was of no help to Di Beichen. The reason he stayed here was purely to accompany her. She would stay at Azure Water School and improve her strength as soon as possible. Then she would be able to travel with Di Beichen. In the next moment, Di Beichen left a light kiss between Bailey Hongzhuang's eyebrows, his eyes full of tenderness. Then I'll leave. Go. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were also full of affection. She hoped that by the time Di Beichen returned, her strength would have improved again. Chapter 626. Hongzhuang, you're back. Without waiting for Bailey Hongzhuang to open the door, the opposite door had already opened. Xia Jiqing poked her head out, and her pretty face was full of excitement. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and nodded. When did you come back? You came very early. I came to the school 2 days ago, and I was bored at home. I saw that it was almost time to come back. Xia Jiqing laughed. Bailey Hongzhuang looked back, but did not see any trace of Di Beichen. She could not help but wonder, Hongzhuang, Di Beichen did not come back with you? She knew how close Di Beichen was to Hongzhuang. It was reasonable to say that since Hongzhuang was here, Di Beichen should not be anywhere else. He had some things to deal with, so he left first. It is estimated that he will return to the school in a few days. Xia Jiqing's face showed a touch of understanding. You're right, Di Beichen's identity really has a lot of things to deal with. Now, Di Beichen's identity was no longer a secret in their eyes. As the young lord of Tiangang's sect, he must be very busy. In order to be able to accompany Hongzhuang, Di Beichen must be under a lot of pressure. After Xia Jiqing pulled Bailey Hongzhuang to chat, Bailey Hongzhuang returned to the house. Now, she had been studying inscription for some time. Although she practiced many times in the Chaos Ring, it was all virtual practice with the old man. She had never really drawn an inscription. Taking advantage of this opportunity, it was better to draw an inscription to try. Practice makes perfect. Every inscription master was born under the accumulation of countless inscription materials. Just like alchemists, they could only be cultivated under the accumulation of countless medicinal materials, because only after many times of practice, they would have an intuition. This kind of intuition could not be understood by others. It was like knowing how many materials to add, how much strength to the stroke was just right. This was the intuition of an inscription master. If one had this intuition, when drawing inscriptions in the future, the success rate would be higher and higher. Bailey Hongzhuang bought some inscription materials in Kanglan City. The inscription she wanted to draw this time was not complicated, so the materials were not difficult to find. What's more, because of the existence of Kanglan School, Kanglan City's trade was very prosperous. It was not difficult for her to find these basic materials. Inscriptions were made up of complex geometrical figures. Different figures had different effects. Stacking them in different order would also have different effects. In the eyes of others, These might be some incomprehensible but very complicated patterns. Only inscriptionists would understand the meaning of these patterns. However, just as the alchemist's pill recipe was confidential, the inscription master would only let others see the specific pattern when drawing the inscription. Once the inscription was formed, only a simple pattern would appear, and all the structure would not be seen. Inscription was a very tedious process. It took a long time to configure the inscription liquid. If there was a problem in the configuration, it also needed to be redone. The degree of precision was not simple compared to alchemy. Chapter 6:27. Bailey Hongzhuang grinded the inscription liquid and prepared the inscription paper before she started to draw. This time, she did not intend to copy too complicated inscriptions. She felt that the inscription technique that the old man taught her was very good. Although the level of the inscription was not high, she felt that the effect was not small. For some ordinary cultivators, as long as the inscription was imprinted on the weapon, then the power of the weapon would increase. Do not underestimate this little bit of help. When the power of the weapon increased, the combat power of the cultivator would also increase a lot. Bailey Hongzhuang calmed herself down. She picked up the inscription pen and dipped it in the inscription liquid and began to draw. The fiery red inscription liquid was like cinnabar, but it was rippling with a little bit of golden light, bright and shining. The moment the inscription pen touched the inscription paper, Bailey Hongzhuang's spirit had reached the peak. All of her mental power was focused on drawing the inscription. As an alchemist, she had always been able to concentrate her mental power. At this moment, her mind was only focused on the inscription she was about to draw. Other than that, there was nothing else. Long before the pen, she had already thought of the inscription pattern. Therefore, she did not hesitate and directly began to draw. All inscriptions needed to be finished in one stroke. There cannot be a break in the middle. Once there was a break, then the drawing would be wrong. Not only that, the difference in strength of the pen and the uneven inscription liquid would lead to the failure of the inscription. Therefore, becoming an inscription master was more difficult than becoming an alchemist. It was precisely because of this that the number of inscriptionists was even rarer than alchemists. When Bailey Hongzhuang was drawing, she found a problem that she did not find in the virtual practice. The inscription pen was a little stagnant during the drawing process. It was this little stagnation that led to the failure of the inscription. Bailey Hongzhuang did not care. Failure was the mother of success. The reason why she prepared so many inscription papers was that she was already prepared for failure. The second time, failure. The third time, failure. Until the eighth time, Bailey Hongzhuang was finally able to use the inscription pen to draw a smooth line. The reason why there was stagnation before was because she did not control the strength of the pen well enough. After the ninth time, Bailey Hongzhuang drew more than half of the inscription. She suddenly found that the inscription liquid on the pen was not enough, because she had used too much inscription liquid before. The 10th time, failure. Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and Baisher sat in a row, quietly watching Bailey Hongzhuang fail repeatedly. They sighed with emotion. Once Master got serious, he was still very scary. It was as if she didn't know what failure was and what oppression was. She only had a stubborn heart. As long as he persevered, he would succeed sooner or later. The three beasts remained silent, not daring to disturb Bailey Hongzhuang. At the same time, they were secretly cheering for their master. Until the 21st time, Bailey Hongzhuang finally succeeded in drawing an inscription. Above the inscription drawing, a fiery red light flashed, like a splendid firework, and a six-pointed star pattern quietly formed. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curved into a smile. After 20 failures, she had finally succeeded in drawing an inscription. Finally, I succeeded in drawing an inscription. Looking at the red, six-pointed star pattern, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a touch of satisfaction. Then she put it aside and continued to draw. Chapter 6:28. 22nd attempt, failure. 23rd attempt, failure. On the 30th attempt, Bailey Hongzhuang successfully drew another one. Compared to the previous failure rate, there was an improvement. In the end, Bailey Hongzhuang drew 3 inscription drawings. It wasn't because she didn't want to continue, but because she had used up all of her inscription fluid. If she wanted to continue, she would have to reconfigure the inscription fluid. However, in her current situation, it was not suitable for her to continue. This was because she had already used up a lot of her mental power. Inscription was something that consumed a lot of mental power. It did not require any elemental energy, only mental power was consumed. Seeing Bailey Hongzhuang stop, the three beasties quickly jumped behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Xiao He and Xiao Bai began to massage Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulders, while Baisher was in charge of massaging her back. Bailey Hongzhuang packed up her things. It seemed that if she wanted to improve her inscription technique, she would need a lot of practice. As for the effects of these three inscription drawings, she wasn't completely sure. It would be better to sell them first to understand the market. In her previous life, she didn't know much about inscription. Now, she didn't know much about inscription because the number of inscription masters was too small. Until now, she hadn't met a single inscription master. The next day, Bailey Hongzhuang brought the three inscription drawings to the auction. Even in Songlan City, there were no inscription shops that sold inscription. The reason why she didn't sell at the academy was because it was her first time drawing an inscription. She wasn't completely sure about the effects of the inscription. She didn't understand the market price, so she couldn't directly quote a price. If she auctioned it at the academy, the students would give her face and raise the price. However, if the inscription didn't meet her expectations, she didn't want to see that happen. Therefore, under these circumstances, she could only choose to sell it at the auction. She believed that the appraiser at the auction would have a certain understanding of the inscription. As for the price at the auction, she had no qualms about it. Bailey Hongzhuang wore a black cloak to the auction. She didn't want to reveal her identity. She was still a newbie, so it was better if fewer people knew about this. Tianxiang Auction House was located in many cities of the Shengxian continent, and Azure Water City had a branch of Tianxiang Auction House. Bailey Hongzhuang walked in without hesitation. She had a good impression of the Tianxiang Auction House. Moreover, the Tianxiang Auction House had a resounding reputation. Presumably, there would be many customers. After seeing the three inscriptions, the appraiser's attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly changed a bit. The number of inscriptions was very small, and the inscription technique was extremely complex. Some famous inscription masters would directly inscribe inscriptions on weapons. Most of the inscriptions drawn on inscription blueprints were not high-level inscriptions. Even so, inscriptions were still sought after by many practitioners, and low-level inscriptions also had a huge market. This was because every cultivator wished to increase the power of their weapons. How many cultivators were there in the Shengxian continent? He did not dare to imagine. Because of this, inscriptions had always been a hot commodity. "Miss, what's the effect of your inscription?" the appraiser asked. Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment and said, "This inscription has a fire attribute. Once it is stored on a weapon, it will have a fire effect and increase its lethality." Chapter 629. After Bailey Hongzhuang gave the inscription to the appraiser, she returned to Songlan School. This inscription was the simplest inscription, so she didn't expect it to sell for a high price. What she wanted to know was the effect of the weapon used by the buyer. As long as the buyer was from Songlan City, she believed that she would be able to get some information. After returning to the dormitory, Bailey Hongzhuang went into seclusion. She put all of her spiritual power into drawing the inscription. Once her spiritual power was exhausted, she began to cultivate. When her spiritual power was restored, she continued to draw the inscription. She spent all of her time drawing the inscription and cultivating. Every time her spiritual power was exhausted, Bailey Hongzhuang's face would turn pale, and her mind would feel empty. However, Bailey Hongzhuang found that in this process, her spiritual power had improved to a certain extent. Her spiritual power was already very strong compared to ordinary people, so it was very difficult to improve her spiritual power. She never thought that this method would be beneficial to her spiritual power. As a result, Bailey Hongzhuang was so busy that she didn't know what fatigue was. Under such practice, her inscription technique had also improved by quite a bit. Over the past few days, she had been drawing the same inscription. What she cared about was not the effect of the inscription, but the feeling of drawing the inscription. Although inscription and alchemy were both very delicate work, there was a slight difference between the two. Every time an alchemist refined a new pill, there would be a huge challenge. Even if they succeeded this time, it didn't mean that they would succeed the next time. Inscription technique was different. As long as an inscription master mastered the method of drawing the inscription, the success rate would greatly increase. Even if the next inscription was a brand new one, as long as the structure of the inscription was understood, the success rate would still be the same as the success rate of drawing other inscriptions. Therefore, inscription technique was the most difficult, but if one mastered the essence, then the next step would be much easier. Unfortunately, this was the most difficult part of inscription technique, and many people were unable to overcome it. 3 days later, Bailey Hongzhuang received the money sent by Tianxiang Auction House. Looking at the amount of money, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. It seemed that inscriptions were still very popular in the market. Her inscription was just an extremely simple inscription, but it was still sold at a good price. However, what made Bailey Hongzhuang helpless was that the person who bid for the inscription was not from Songlan City. That person actually left after bidding for the inscription. This result made Bailey Hongzhuang extremely helpless. She wanted to see the specific effect of the inscription, but it seemed that she had to buy a weapon to try it out. As for her glazed sword, that was naturally impossible. Even if she were to inscribe the glazed sword in the future, she would definitely choose an extremely good inscription. With her current inscription technique, if she were to inscribe on the glass sword, it would really be a waste. Speaking of which, after being nurtured by Bailey Hongzhuang during this period of time, the glazed sword had become much closer to her. When she was in the ruins, she had only left her own breath on the glazed sword, but the glazed sword did not completely accept her. After a weapon reached a certain level, it would have its own spirituality, and it would choose its own master. Chapter 630. Bailey Hongzhuang had obtained Bai Qing's inheritance in the ruins, and Bai Qing was also very generous to Bailey Hongzhuang. Not only did she give her best martial arts to Bailey Hongzhuang, she even helped Bailey Hongzhuang erase the mark that belonged to her on the glass sword. Bai Qing was a strong person, and the glass sword was used by Bai Qing all year round, so the mark on it could be said to be deeply rooted. If Bailey Hongzhuang relied on her own strength, it would take a long time to completely erase the mark that belonged to Bai Qing on the glass sword. If she was the Bailey Hongzhuang of her previous life, it would be very easy to erase the mark, but now it was really inferior. With the help of Bai Qing, the tacit understanding between her and the glass sword had become much simpler. Now she was getting more and more comfortable with using the glass sword, and it would definitely become a big weapon in the future. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door, and Bailey Hongzhuang opened the door after putting away the inscriptions. Outside the door, Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with emotion. Hongzhuang, you are too hard, right? How long have you been in seclusion? Since Bailey Hongzhuang came to the college, she stayed in the house all day long. She didn't have to think. She knew that Hongzhuang must be in seclusion. However, wasn't this seclusion too hard? Once she went in, she didn't come out. Even though she knew that Hongzhuang had always been very diligent in her cultivation, but this was too exaggerated. Hongzhuang, you haven't come out these days. Jiqing is very worried about you. Bai Junyu also echoed. If it wasn't for the occasional movement from your house, Jiqing and I would have thought that you had fainted. Although cultivators could go into closed-door cultivation for different periods of time, and some cultivators who were extremely powerful could go into closed-door cultivation for decades at a time. However, Hongzhuang's closed-door cultivation was quite long given their current abilities. If it were him, he would suffocate to death if he stayed in the house for such a long time. An awkward smile appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. She had always been serious and couldn't care less about other things. In her eyes, the time spent in seclusion wasn't long, but in the eyes of Jiqing and the others, it was indeed a long time. Why are you looking for me? Bailey Hongzhuang asked. Xia Jiqing nodded. The principal asked the students of our special enrollment class to go to the principal's office together. There should be something to announce. I see. Bailey Hongzhuang understood. The principal had always sent them over for something, but she didn't know what it was this time. Hongzhuang, while you were in seclusion, Dongfang Yu and the others came to ask about you, but they were worried that you were at a critical juncture, so they didn't dare to disturb you. Today, I heard the movement from your room, so I dared to knock on the door. Xia Jiqing looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a sigh. She had heard that Gong Shaoqing was a cultivation madman, but now it seemed that Bailey Hongzhuang's degree of craziness was no less than Gong Shaoqing's. "I made you worry." Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were a little apologetic. During this time, she had put her heart and soul into inscription technique and simply didn't care about other things. Only when she went out for a short time to auction the inscription, she was afraid that everyone thought she went out to buy dry food. "As long as you're okay." Xia Jiqing smiled brightly. "You pack up, and we'll go to the principal's office." Chapter 631. When Bailey Hongzhuang packed up and walked out of the dormitory, Dongfang Yu, Gong Shaoqing, and the others were already gathered at the door, waiting for her. "You've all come out," Bailey Hongzhuang said with a smile. When everyone saw Bailey Hongzhuang come out, their faces also showed a smile, but there was no lack of worry in their eyes. "Hongzhuang, you've been in seclusion for a really long time. Everyone is worried about you." Zhang Yinfeng walked to Bailey Hongzhuang's side, her pretty and youthful face showing a little worry. Bailey Hongzhuang waved her hand. "Don't worry about me. I used to be in seclusion like this, so I unknowingly stayed in the room for such a long time." Hearing this, everyone was slightly stunned, and then they also showed a helpless smile. Bailey Hongzhuang's seclusion like this had already made them sigh with emotion. Often like this, everyone looked at each other. The worry in their eyes still had not dissipated. They had known Bailey Hongzhuang for a while, but they had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang in seclusion like this before. From Xia Jiqing's mouth, they already knew that Deep Beichen had to go back to Tiangang's sect to deal with something. So now he was not at the college. They already knew the identity of Deep Beichen, and that Han Xiling was definitely not a simple character. The last time Han Xiling had already expressed his attitude. They were afraid that if Han Xiling was sandwiched between Bailey Hongzhuang and Deep Beichen, there would be a lot of obstacles in their relationship. When Bailey Hongzhuang and Xia Jiqing mentioned this before, Xia Jiqing did not pay too much attention to it. Now, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang in seclusion, it must be related to Deep Beichen. Not only Xia Jiqing had such thoughts, but Zhang Yinfeng and the others also had the same thoughts. "It's good that you're fine. Let's go to the principal's office first." Zhang Yinfeng held Bailey Hongzhuang's hand with a smile, thinking about how to make Bailey Hongzhuang happy. Xia Jiqing also nodded. "Let's go, otherwise the principal will be waiting for us." After saying that, everyone walked towards the principal's office together. However, Bailey Hongzhuang felt that everyone's gazes were different from before, but she couldn't figure out what was different. She only felt that it was a little strange. Very quickly, everyone arrived at the principal's office. Principal Ren Tianxiong and Vice Principal Huan Chuyu were both present. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others arrive, the two principals revealed smiles on their faces. "Greetings, Principal and Vice Principal." Everyone bowed. Ren Tianxiong smiled faintly. "I called everyone here today because I have something to tell you." Everyone's eyes focused on Ren Tianxiong. They knew that Ren Tianxiong had called them over for a reason. "Does everyone know about Lingyin College?" Ren Tianxiong said slowly. Hearing this, everyone's face showed a touch of surprise. They had naturally heard of the name Lingyin College, but they did not know why Ren Tianxiong would mention it. Bailey Hongzhuang also had a certain understanding of Lingyin College. When Fu Hongbo and Liu Huayan invited her to Kanglin College, she had learned about the colleges in Shengxian Continent. Chapter 632. Looking at the slightly changed expressions of the crowd, Ren Tianxiong understood that with the name of Lingyin College, there were very few cultivators who did not know about it. Since everyone knows about Lingyin College, I will not introduce it more. In our area, there are 3 colleges. Among them, Lingyin College is the most famous and the strongest. Kanglin College is on par with Beihai College. However, in recent years, Beihai College has been leaning towards Lingyin College. Therefore, the relationship between Beihai College and Lingyin College is very good, and our Kanglin College is slightly inferior. In the end, Ren Tianxiong's words were heavy. When the three colleges were first established, the three colleges had always been on par with each other, and there was not much difference. Ren Tianxiong was the arrogant head of Kanglan College. Seeing the decline of Kanglan College step by step, his mood was naturally very heavy. I heard that the reason why Lingyin College has its current reputation is because they relied on the Qing dynasty. With the support of the Qing dynasty, the equipment of Lingyin College has greatly improved. This is not surprising. Gong Xiaoqing's eyes flashed with wisdom. Not only Lingyin College, but Beihai College had also begun to accept the sponsorship of the dynasty. Only Kanglan College had always kept a distance from the dynasty. It was precisely because of this that Kanglan College was at the bottom of the three colleges. If Kanglan College also accepted the help of the dynasty, the strength of Kanglan College would also be improved. Ren Tianxiong sighed. The establishment of the three colleges was only to cultivate talents and maintain neutrality. This was the idea of the first principle of the Kanglan College. It is precisely because of this that I have always adhered to the beliefs of the first principle to run the college. When Lingyin College had the idea of relying on the Qing dynasty, I stopped it. But now everyone is blinded by greed and has long forgotten the essence of the original persistence. Ren Tianxiong's face was indescribable. His bright eyes flashed with a faint light, as if he was thinking of the distant past. Everyone looked at each other. Looking at the appearance of the principal, their mood was a little heavy. It seemed that what the principal had told them was related to Lingyin College. The dark eyes flashed with wisdom. Bailey Hongzhuang had already guessed some things. It was not easy for Ren Tianxiong to maintain the belief of being the first principal to run the school. From this point alone, it could be seen that Ren Tianxiong was not a profit-oriented person. The principal of Lingyin College was more utilitarian. If the college was independent, then there would be no restrictions on the students. Every student who returned from their studies would receive the best blessings from the academy. No matter where the school goes in the future, no matter what it does, the school will support it. This was because the original purpose of the Azure Water School was to help the Shengxian continent cultivate talents. And Lingyin College had joined the Qing dynasty. Presumably, these people were all prepared for the Qing dynasty. It was unknown how many cultivators of Lingyin College had become people of the Qing dynasty. This had a purpose. In this regard, she couldn't say who was right and who was wrong. She could only say that Ren Tianxiong was able to stick to his heart and run the school. It was really admirable.